sigue muy fuerte en seguir apoyando el esquema y el ecosistema de Internet. Creemos fervientemente en un entorno de múltiples partes interesadas, en donde servimos para impulsar y potenciar el Internet. Por eso apoyamos en diciembre pasado la renovación del mandato del Foro de Gobernanza de Internet, y se logra en estas fechas no solo la renovación, sino también poder ser la sede de tan importante evento. Con esto le cedo la palabra al doctor Lenny Montiel, subsecretario general para el Desarrollo Económico del Departamento de Asuntos Económicos y Sociales de Naciones Unidas, a compartir un breve mensaje. Doctor.
Thank you, Victor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to join you today in this beautiful city of Guadalajara, state of Jalisco, to learn and exchange ideas on the collective goals of the Internet community for a sustainable world. On behalf of the United Nations, I would like to thank the government of Mexico, and particularly Mr. Victor Lagunes, Chief Information Officer at the Office of the President, for making this gathering possible and for your commitment and leadership in hosting the 11th session of the Internet Governance Forum. The strong commitment of the Mexican government to the IGF is remarkable. It was in early 2015 that the government announced the pledge to host this IGF in advance of the renewal of the mandate of the IGF in December last year at the General Assembly's review of the YCs plus 10. This commitment is inspiring, demonstrating Mexico's leadership in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As you know, the 2030 Agenda is anchored in 17 Universal Sustainable Development Goals and 169 interconnected targets, providing critical reference points for government, civil society, the private sector, and all relevant stakeholders. One of the SDG targets specifically calls for significant increase in access to information communication technologies and strives to provide universal and affordable access to the Internet in the least developed countries by 2020. This is unambitious but achievable. The prominent profile for the Internet and innovation of ICTs are also highlighted in the Technology Facilitation Mechanism, a major outcome of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and the 2030 Agenda. Clearly, the Internet has penetrated into almost all corners of the globe. For us here and many others, Internet technologies have become a part of our everyday life. We must not forget that many people continue to live in the margin of societies. Many are isolated, whether in rural areas or in urban slums, and lack access to infrastructure, resources, and information. We must not forget that many forms of digital divides remain, both between and within countries and between women and men. It is a concern that such digital divides may be widened with the advancement and diffusion of the Internet. In addition to supporting the UN Secretary General in convening the annual IGF meetings, the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA, supports the UN High-Level Political Forum, which reviews the implementation of the Agenda 2030 and its SDG, as well as the UN Technology Facilitation Mechanism. We also support the interagency work of the UN along with ITU, UNESCO, and others in implementing the outcomes of the World Summit on the Information Society. Working as one, the UN will continue to do more to foster social inclusion, including through the Internet and ICTs. I would like to highlight that this is the 11th IGF and the 10th convened by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who, as you know, is finishing his mandate at the end of this year. Secretary General designate Antonio Gutierrez will take office as of 1st January 2017 and will continue to convene the IGF as per the General Assembly mandate. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let us find concrete and innovative ways for social inclusion to bring about the power of access and knowledge to those in need. Let us work together to leverage on the Internet to empower sustainable development, to leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also like to thank everyone for their presence and here on the table. Well, I'm going to pose 2 questions. Voy a hacer 2 preguntas. Cada uno en la mesa tendrá oportunidad de hablar durante 3 a 5 minutos. Les encargo mucho ser breves en sus respuestas, en respeto a la audiencia y en respeto también a nuestra audiencia en Internet. La primera pregunta trata de un diálogo de múltiples partes interesadas enfocado en las oportunidades que ofrece el modelo de múltiples partes interesadas para la gobernanza de Internet en materia de inclusión y habilidades digitales para el futuro, poniendo énfasis en las habilidades necesarias en un entorno marcado por el aporte de Internet al desarrollo de las personas y de las naciones en diversos aspectos, incluyendo el económico. ¿Qué ventajas ofrece el modelo de múltiples partes interesadas para los esfuerzos globales en materia de inclusión, incluyendo aquellos enfocados en reducir los distintos tipos de brecha digital? Quiero invitar al excelentísimo embajador de China, Qiu Xiaoqi, a presentarnos su respuesta.
Parece que todavía no está resuelta el problema de traducción de chino al ingreso al español. Hasta yo puedo esperar un momento para que esté resuelto este problema.
Muy bien.
Primero, usted puede invitar a otros a hablar primero. Gracias.
De nada, una disculpa por el problema técnico, embajador. Le paso la palabra. Le paso la palabra al secretario de la OIT, el señor Malcolm Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes. Well, ITU is the specialized UN agency for telecommunications and information communication technology. So one of our main objectives is to bring the benefits of ICTs to all peoples, regardless of location, gender, age, or income. And according to ITU's latest statistics, 47% of the world population is using the internet, but that still leaves 3.9 billion that are not. And if we look at the case of the least developed countries, it's a rather sad story of just 1 person out of 7 being connected. And at the same time, there are various other digital divides that are becoming apparent. For example, the gender divide, as was mentioned. It's estimated that there are 200 million less women than men connected. And also persons with disabilities. Many are not able to take benefit of the ICTs. There's a chronic lack of digital skills in many countries, and a lack of affordable solutions, especially in the developing countries. So a world where everyone is connected to the internet is clearly going to be a better place to be informed, to be educated, to be productive and have health care and, in fact, enjoy a better standard of living. But to really benefit from all the innovative products and services available on the internet requires access to high-speed broadband. And this is the issue that ITU is continually bringing to the attention of our government members, 193 governments members of ITU. We need to continually highlight the importance of access to broadband and to make sure that networks are run out in countries, which is quite a challenge, especially for the developing countries, where the majority of the population is living in rural areas. And we need to work together with all stakeholders, especially the private sector. We need to encourage their investment in this rollout. So public-private partnerships will be very important. And the three key words, I believe, are collaboration, cooperation, and coordination between all stakeholders. And this is why the multi-stakeholder model is so important. ITU has a wide membership, governments, private sector, and non-governmental organizations, and recently academia. But we clearly need to work with many other organizations and entities that are not members of ITU. So we're looking forward to doing that, and we believe that events like the IGF, like the WSIS Forum, which we run in Geneva each year, are very important to bring all the multi-stakeholders together and to agree to work together to avoid duplication of effort, to pool resources, and all to work towards a common good. So very pleased that we're here having this discussion with you today. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor Malcolm Johnson, vicesecretario general de la Unión Internacional de Telecomunicaciones. Le cedo la palabra al señor Yari Arco, presidente de la IETF.
Thank you, Moderator Lagunes. And to start with, I wanted to say that I'm pleased to be here in Mexico. And in this conference, the topic today and many other topics during the week are really, really important for the Internet. And I want to respond to the multi-stakeholder question from sort of inside the Internet ecosystem by providing a perspective of the Internet Engineering Task Force, or the IETF. Our mission is to improve the core Internet technology such as TCP/IP or HTTP. I want to begin by saying how important inclusiveness is for all of our work. If you let one or a few parties drive a discussion, you will not get the full picture. For instance, at the IETF, we depend critically on this multi-stakeholder model to get the views of those who build applications, the views of the network operators, views from those who worry about the privacy of the end user, government's views where regulatory issues are involved, and so on. The biggest value that we get in our work is from these discussions between different types of people. Our model on how we achieve this is actually a little bit special, but I feel that it has worked well for us. The basic idea is to have very low barrier for participation. All you need is an email address, some facility with the English language, and a good idea or good feedback. Everybody who's interested on a topic is welcome, and discussions are held together. We try to draw people to our meetings as well, and for that the Internet Society, for instance, runs a fellows program, but our primary work happens online, so the cost of participation are low. It is perhaps an interesting contrast to many other organizations that are structured around different types of participants, for instance, government, civil society, and business. In IETF, people represent themselves and their ideas, not a particular sector. And I'm quite proud of the results, actually. Our specifications come from people in 76 different countries, from many different backgrounds. And for the tech industry, at least, our organization has a quite good gender distribution in our leadership groups, and so on. But I don't want to give a view that there are no challenges either. We keep trying to draw in an even broader set of people, and it's hard work. One of the difficulties is that for any given topic, the participants need a reason to participate, and they need knowledge to engage in the discussion productively. Where there is a lot of internet industry, academia, or governance experts, it is easy to find those participants, but it is harder elsewhere. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Yari Arco, presidente de la IETF. Doctora Dorothy Atwood, vicepresidenta senior de Políticas Públicas Globales de Disney. Bienvenida.
Thank you. I'm Dorothy Atwood, and I'm Senior Vice President of Global Public Policy for the Walt Disney Company. To answer your question directly, the multi-stakeholder model is essential to foster internet growth and to maximize inclusion while preserving diversity. I'd like to direct my comments to the role of content in meeting the twin goals of inclusion and diversity and how the multi-stakeholder model is an enabler. Walt Disney saw storytelling and entertainment as vital elements to building social cohesion. He once said, "We have created characters and animated them in the dimension of depth, revealing through them to our perturbed world that the things we have in common far outnumber and outweigh those that divide us. As far back as 2011, UNESCO, ISOC, and the OECD looked at the relationship between the availability of locally relevant content, infrastructure development, and prices for access. Unsurprisingly, it showed a strong correlation between them. They create a virtuous cycle where more of one stimulates the other, and all work to bridge the divide. Increased locally relevant content drives adoption, which drives investment in infrastructure, which improves access prices, further providing incentives for even greater content creation. The benefits of the virtuous cycle will be maximized by taking a broad view and encouraging all kinds of content that is meaningful to the user's life. A vibrant online content creation market brings benefits not only for local users, but it can create a springboard for content creators to gain access to audiences all around the globe, allowing them to invest in even more content and drive job growth in the creative sector. This week's participants in the IGF will hear from an entrepreneur from Ghana, for example, who's developed a show called An African City, which has found an audience in the global Western African diaspora. Through successful licensing arrangements with distributors in and out of Africa, she's been able to create 2 seasons of her series, doubling her production budget for the 2nd season. At Disney, we too seek to find stories and storytellers wherever they are. While, of course, we release blockbuster movies like Zootopia and Star Wars, we know that to be successful, we have to provide content that is locally relevant and contextualized to the local market. Being here in Mexico, I'll just comment briefly on an investment we made recently in local sports content, for example. We have a state-of-the-art production facility in Mexico City that produces the Mexican edition of Sports Edition, ESPN's flagship sports news, and it's become a world-class facility for us for all over Mexico and Latin America. Digging a little deeper, given the importance of locally relevant content to drive inclusion, diversity, and internet growth, we believe there are 3 main drivers that create an enabling environment. First, an environment supportive of free expression is critical, whether we're talking about creative expression or political speech. Second, a strong, trusted e-commerce infrastructure that includes privacy protections, consumer protections, and ubiquitous payment platforms is crucial. Also protecting intellectual property. It will promote the development of business models and protect consumers while allowing content creators to create sustainable businesses. Finally, improving access to finance, credit, and business support services for emerging artists as well are important to promote a robust content creation industry. Most importantly, implementing these solutions takes multi-stakeholder cooperative action from national governments, NGOs, and multiple private sector entities all along the value chain. If we work to enable the world's storytellers through multi-stakeholder-driven solution, I believe we'll see the dividends of inclusion, diversity, and other extraordinary benefits of internet growth increased. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, doctora. En atención a un tema de agenda, si me permiten, le cederé la palabra al embajador de la República de la gente de China, el embajador Qiu Xiaoqi. Por favor, embajador.
尊敬的主席先生，各位同事，首先请允许我代表中国代表团祝贺联合国互联网治理论坛第11届会议取得成功举办，感谢墨西哥政府和论坛秘书处为此次会议所做的大量努力和周到的安排。各位同事，我们生活在一个前所未有的数字化时代，信息通讯技术日新月异，网络空间与现实世界深度融合，互联网成为人类工作生活的新空间，经济社会发展的新引擎，文化繁荣的新平台，交流合作的新纽带。与此同时，各种新威胁、新挑战也不断涌现。 互联网领域发展不平衡、规则不健全、秩序不合理等问题日益凸显，国家和地区间的数字鸿沟不断拉大，世界范围内侵害个人隐私、侵犯知识产权、网络犯罪等时有发生，网络监听、网络攻击、网络恐怖主义等成为全球公害，互联网治理成为摆在国际社会面前的一个重要课题。各位同事，作为信息社会世界峰会的重要成果，联合国互联网治理论坛迄今已举办10届，为推动互联网国际治理做出了重要贡献。今天我们站在新的起点上 ，EDF 在未来10年应充分发挥其独特作用，凝聚各方的智慧和力量，努力建立多边、民主、透明的全球互联网治理体系，构建和平、安全、开放、合作的网络空间。为此，我愿提出3点建议：第一，坚持继承与创新并行。互联网的发展并未改变以联合国宪章为核心的国际秩序，宪章所确立的主权平等、不干涉内政、不使用武力、和平解决争端等原则，在网络空间同样适用，这也已成为国际社会的普遍共识。同时，我们还应该在继承中创新和发展，弘扬人类文明进步的成果，秉持共享、共建、共赢、共治的新型国际关系理念，努力构建持久和平、共同繁荣的网络空间命运共同体。第二，坚持发展与安全并重。发展是安全的前提，安全是发展的保障。一方面，我们要坚持在发展中促安全，努力推动互联网的普遍接入，致力于弥合数字鸿沟，加大对发展中国家的援助，建设以人为本、面向发展、包容性的信息社会。另一方面，我们要坚持以安全保发展，悉心呵护数字经济的健康强劲发展，既不能追求绝对安全，牺牲发展活力，也不能以市场化、贸易自由化为由，回避必要的安全监管。第三，坚持共治与合作并举。网络空间是人类共同活动空间，行为体也日益多元化。构建互联网全球治理体系，要坚持多边主义，由各国平等参与，共同决策，不搞一家主导和几家凑在一起说了算。要鼓励政府、企业、社群、国际组织等各利益攸关方发挥各自应有的作用，努力实现互联网资源共享、责任共担，让我们共同的家园更加美丽、更加安全。各位同事，中国拥有7亿网民、8.7亿移动宽带用户，互联网深度融入经济社会发展和人民生活。在创新、协调、绿色、开放、共享的发展理念指引下，中国正在大力实施网络强国战略、国家大数字战略、互联网+行动计划，推进数字中国建设，发展分享经济。中国的互联网发展成就不仅造福中国，也是对世界网络安全和发展的贡献。近年来，中国积极促进 G20 数字经济发展合作，推动数字丝绸之路、中国东盟信息港等建设，致力于让更多的国家和人民共享互联网带来的发展机遇。中国愿同国际社会一道，积极倡导对话合作，共同促进网络空间互联互通、共享共治，维护持久安全，实现全球包容、可持续增长。最后，我预祝本次会议取得圆满成功。谢谢大家。
Muchas gracias, embajador. Le cedo la palabra al maestro Philip Ben, vicepresidente senior de Comercio Electrónico de Walmart. Bienvenido.
Gracias, Víctor. Thank you very much for inviting us to this conference and high-level meeting. We are We have been following and admiring the efforts by the Mexican government and also by the state government of Jalisco to bring the internet to Mexicans. As a retailer whose mission is to help customers save money so they can live better, Walmart is deeply committed to the goals of this organization and what everybody represents. From the perspective of a retailer who engages in e-commerce, which is a major part of our business, we believe in three areas where the multi-stakeholder model can be of significant advantage. The first one is to accelerate the basic infrastructure, which includes access to the internet, reliable internet, but it also includes access to physical infrastructure that enables commerce associated with the internet. It's not enough to just provide data, it's also important to provide the pipes, the roads, and the financial infrastructure to enable commerce and enable customers to have access to the goods and services that the internet provides. Secondly, it's important for all of us to establish a level playing field in which competition is encouraged in an environment of trust and also of protection of privacy and customers' rights. And thirdly, we believe in establishing a culture of innovation. We have heard a couple of examples this morning of both federal and state government efforts to foster that. We strongly believe that the internet can be unlocked through a culture of innovation, which starts at the very basic education level, but goes all the way through to the workforce. We are committed to a diverse, free, and open internet, which can be used for good. And we believe that e-commerce is one of the areas where the internet can truly contribute to a country's development goals. Thank you.
Gracias, Philip. Le cedo la palabra al maestro Izcoatl Tonatiu Bravo, rector general de la Universidad de Guadalajara, y le agradezco también su apoyo hacia la realización de este evento.
Muchas gracias a todos ustedes y bienvenidos a Guadalajara, quienes vivimos en esta ciudad y en este estado. Les expresamos nuestra cordial bienvenida. Bueno, las universidades tenemos un rol muy importante en torno al tema de Internet, al cual ya se han referido aquí varios de ustedes en sus participaciones. La parte más clásica, por decirlo así, de las universidades sería, en primer lugar, la formación de técnicos, de licenciados, de maestros y de doctores en toda la amplia gama de programas que implican el desarrollo de habilidades digitales, de la expansión de las redes, del software, del desarrollo de hardware, en fin, todo lo que se necesita para que finalmente el Internet pueda funcionar. También nos corresponde a las universidades trabajar en torno a la investigación de todo tipo, no solamente tecnológica, sino también principalmente de carácter social. Baste decir, por ejemplo, que una tesis de doctorado de una alumna de la Universidad de Guadalajara demostró cómo el Internet era ampliamente usado entre las comunidades indígenas del norte del estado y los Estados Unidos en virtud de los migrantes, de manera tal que aparentemente las partes más atrasadas, sin embargo, son las que mayor demanda pueden tener del Internet. Sin embargo, hay otros aspectos de extensión muy importantes en los que las universidades participamos y gracias a la estrategia digital, de desarrollo digital que ha lanzado el gobierno mexicano, las universidades hemos podido participar particularmente en el programa México Conectado, que tiene la posibilidad de incorporar el trabajo de todas las universidades públicas del país con la finalidad de generar nuevos sitios para la conectividad de Internet. Hay que tomar en consideración que en esta experiencia, si bien se han habilitado más de 100,000 sitios nuevos para la conexión a nivel o de carácter público, Es muy importante para nosotros contar con otros apoyos complementarios a los cuales me quisiera referir. Se requiere, pues, entonces, fortalecer la conectividad de todos los campus, la conectividad de banda ancha, robusta, estable, en donde esté la red para educación e investigación y podamos formar a los profesionistas con todas las orientaciones y la preparación, la capacitación tecnológica para este propósito. Hace un momento se dieron diversas intervenciones en las que se daba cuenta del comercio electrónico, se daba cuenta de el Internet aplicado al entretenimiento, pero ustedes lo saben, esto es universal, el campo de la salud, el campo de la educación principalmente, pero todos los campos prácticamente es a nivel universal el uso y la necesidad de Internet. Por eso, entonces, yo aquí haría dos últimos comentarios. El primero, que las universidades podemos participar en la habilitación de espacios de conectividad para ampliar la atención y la disponibilidad de Internet y reducir la brecha digital. Por otro lado, en la preparación clásica de alumnos y de usuarios, pero extendernos a otros públicos que no sean exclusivamente los de carácter universitario. Y tercero, el tema que me parece esencial es poder formar nuevas competencias e innovación en el uso de Internet. En la medida en que Internet es un espacio totalmente libre, hecho de manera totalmente independiente a través de la interconexión mundial, es en la medida en la que la innovación puede y debe ser la característica fundamental de la red a nivel global. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, maestro. Ahora nos plantea su respuesta la doctora Katy Brown, presidenta y directora ejecutiva de Internet Society. Doctora, bienvenida.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor, and thank you once again for having the Internet Society as such a crucial part of today's conversation. We thank you for your hospitality and, frankly, for this gathering. I am quite pleased to see this multi-stakeholder panel, as large as it is, to be the focus of this day, where the government itself, in hosting, realizes that the questions need to be addressed by a diversity of parties. So we're well on our way, after 10 years, I think, of how we might want to address these important questions. As we talked about this morning, we are in a moment in time in the Internet where we are faced with complex issues that require careful and cautious but urgent solutions. In order for us to proceed in a way that is that parallels the very architecture of the Internet, that is, its openness, its transparency, its transnational nature, its non-centralized properties, we need to have decision-making processes that are parallel to the very complex issues that we face. So those are distributed, those are local, those are national, those are international. In order to arrive at good decision-making, it seems to us, we have to put some meat on the bones of what we mean in real life for multi-stakeholder processes. It seems to me that it is now the time for us to reform many of the ways that we have done things, because we've done them all along, to think through how we go beyond a notion of consultation on any particular issue and move toward consensus participation. So a couple of thoughts. One, we need to address issues where they arise. So if the issue has to do with how do parents think their children should use the internet in the classroom, it seems to me that's a very local issue with stakeholders that are quite clear: the children, the parents, the administrators, the community, the teachers. And they have quite the ability to sort through these things. When they're on the national level and we're sorting through commercial issues, we know we need the companies involved, we need the customers involved, we need users. Sometimes we need government, not always, but there may be times we do for normative type issues that we have to solve. And certainly internationally, I respect the statement of the ambassador from China that they are indeed complex and that we have mutual concerns about they come out, how those issues are decided across border. These will require much more thoughtful kinds of exercises about how nation states, sovereign nations, come together to deal with a transnational phenomena that all of the world's people can use. So I think that we are at a stage where we actually need to think through how the process works and to think through reform. Because in order to actually deal with some of the issues that we know are affecting the trust, safety, and security of the internet, and indeed its ability to be available to all the peoples of the world, it will take that kind of effort. Thank you so much, Victor.
Gracias, doctora. Cedo la palabra al subsecretario doctor Eber Betanzos Torres, de la Función Pública, de la Secretaría del mismo nombre. Gracias, subsecretario.
Muchas gracias, Víctor. Ofrezco primeramente una disculpa por el retraso provocado del tráfico aéreo. Quiero expresarle a todos los ministros y ministras que están en este evento, los miembros del sector privado, de la academia, de la sociedad civil, los representantes de los medios de comunicación, mi reconocimiento en primer lugar a la organización de este evento del Foro para la Gobernanza de Internet, la asistencia al evento y la generosidad de compartir en este foro las diferentes experiencias y visiones que desde sus puntos de vista, cada quien en su especialidad, están aportando. Es un honor para mí expresar algunos puntos de vista a partir de sobre el modelo de múltiples partes interesadas en estos distintos esfuerzos globales que se han implementado en materia de inclusión. Quiero reiterar que el Internet es una herramienta que lo que permite es habilitar derechos fundamentales para los ciudadanos, tales como el derecho a la información, derecho a la privacidad, el derecho a las tecnologías de la información, a los servicios de radiodifusión, de telecomunicación. Es por eso que nuestra Carta Fundamental lo reconoce como un derecho humano, pero también en el sentido de que permite fungir como un aplanador del desarrollo y del conocimiento, al democratizar a través del acceso a el Internet, que se convierta en un mecanismo, una herramienta para que las sociedades sean más incluyentes. El Estado mexicano, en su Plan Nacional de Desarrollo, como lo establece su propio orden constitucional, busca que tenga un crecimiento con desarrollo sostenible, que exista una sociedad con equidad, con cohesión social, con igualdad sustantiva. Un México incluyente propondrá enfocar la acción del Estado para garantizar el acceso a derechos sociales, para cerrar las brechas en la desigualdad que se ha presentado históricamente en este país, y para dar cumplimiento a este objetivo, las tecnologías de la información y las comunicaciones juegan un papel esencial, como he referido, como un aplanador del desarrollo. La transformación gubernamental en México hace uso de estas herramientas tecnológicas incluyéndolas en el funcionamiento de las dependencias y las entidades de la administración pública federal y locales, buscando que se agilicen los trámites que realizan los ciudadanos, que se coadyuve con la transparencia de la función pública, con elevar los servicios gubernamentales, con erradicar la corrupción, pero también buscando que exista una sociedad que ejerza una democracia que pueda, a partir de eso, y con eso concluyo, ser responsiva, que le exija también al ejercicio del gobierno. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, subsecretario. Viene con nosotros la profesora Mishi Choudhary, director legal del Centro de Asesoramiento Legal sobre Código Libre. Bienvenida.
Thank you very much for having me here. The premise of this conversation is that internet is a medium of inclusion and education. I'm very glad such is the premise. It used to be true, and one value in the multi-stakeholder model is that its validity depends on giving some reality to this idea. The multi-stakeholder model in internet governance is no happy accident. It's the very nature of the internet and the participants who have built it. It started with the free and open source software movement in the 20th century. What that did was made participation in software making and services by allowing everybody to copy, modify, and share possible for anyone who was interested. The internet allows everyone to participate because protocols are open. They are adopted by consensus, and everybody can implement them. This is crucial in the same way that open participation in science is crucial. Everybody is there because we learned in the 20th century that maximum participation makes better social policy. The possibility of this broad participation is the real economic and social promise of the net. And when we talk about the net, what we are always referring to are the open participatory mechanisms and cooperation through methods pioneered by the sharing economy. Our goals should be the operational equivalents of the propositions of openness, transparency, and participation. That's why I'm a little surprised that why freedom and liberty don't feature in these discussions as much as the term multi-stakeholder does. Having recognized that, at present, the net is well along in its transformation into a behavior collection system. Many stakeholders see their economic and political futures secured by collecting, monetizing, and deploying actions based on the behavior collection they engage in or obtain the results of through brute force or power. This is the net that we do not want. The real value of the multi-stakeholder model is that it keeps the doors of this room open so that we can come here and talk about when the premise itself has shifted. The center of gravity has moved from the possibility of educating every brain on Earth into a behavior collector. Now it's all about what comes back by way of clickstream, behavior information, location data, preference data, and profiling, and the value that the net provides to people, education, economic opportunity, cultural exchange is all basically become the front service incentive to continue to produce behavior on the net. It's only in a multi-stakeholder setting we can acknowledge what Sir Tim Berners-Lee or Richard Stallman already know. Their deep anxiety about the direction the World Wide Web is currently taking. The revelations by Snowden, what the web has been used by the governments, and the realization that a few companies have become gatekeepers to our digital lives. This is the value of the multi-stakeholder model, that I can sit here and talk about this. The net's default model was supposed to be openness and decentralization, as allows diverse voices, voices like ours, which are from the global south, north, or wherever, who are not in this room, but can use the platforms like Facebook and Twitter for their voices to be heard before the voters actually tell you where the tide is. This is the idea that the human beings can be connected through this medium and also exchange and bring the promise of the net. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, profesora. Con nosotros está el doctor Steve Crocker, presidente de la Junta Ejecutiva de ICANN. Bienvenido.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here in Guadalajara at the IGF meeting generally and at this high-level meeting in particular. I want to say a very special thanks to the government of Mexico for inviting me to participate in this session. It's a pleasure to participate with this very distinguished group of government officials, community leaders, and Internet governance experts. It's quite exciting that the IGF has now entered its second decade, improving itself as a robust platform for the Internet governance dialogue. It's been a long journey, and we wouldn't be here at the 11th IGF if it weren't for the hard work, continued support, and numerous community actors striving to further improve the IGF. ICANN has consistently been a strong supporter of the IGF since its inception and has increased this support over the years. We view the IGF as a positive example of an effective platform for stimulating constructive dialogue on Internet topics across the global multi-stakeholder community. From the very beginning, the Internet was fundamentally based on a set of open standards which were developed through open and collaborative processes. Open standards are key to maintaining one single interoperable Internet and to allowing more than 3.5 billion people today to communicate and share information. Openness is vital to the integrity of the Internet and to foster innovation and creativity and allow economies and societies to take advantage of the enormous opportunities offered by the Internet. The policymaking part of the Internet has also evolved on the principle of openness, allowing those who are interested in and or affected by such policies to take part in the policy development process. Internet technical bodies such as the IETF, the regional Internet registries, and ICANN have embraced policy development processes that are driven by community in an open and bottom-up manner. 10 years ago, when the IGF was making its early steps, we had slightly more than 1 billion users connected to the Internet, which we thought was a large number. Today we have around 3.6 billion users. This is spectacular growth, and yet there are around 4 billion more people who are still offline. Clearly, connectivity of the unconnected is one of the main challenges the global community is faced with today. The challenge here is a multi-level one. The barriers to access are diverse, from lack of infrastructure and affordability in developing and least developed countries to lack of relevant local content and lack of trust in some developed countries. There are numerous initiatives by many actors around the world, from governments, industry, and technical community, to overcome those barriers. One challenge that ICANN has been dealing with is making the Internet domain names available in various scripts. This is, of course, a very small portion of the very large set of issues, but it's one that we focus on at ICANN. Historically, domain names were available only in ASCII, that is the Latin-based characters. Today, there are 136 top-level domains available in 21 scripts of 35 languages, such as Chinese, Cyrillic, Devanagari, Arabic, to name just a few. Making new top-level domains, IDNs and ASCII, usable in all applications and accessible to the 3.6 billion Internet users requires a great deal of work that has been underway for some time and is known as universal acceptance. Universal acceptance is a foundational requirement for a truly multilingual Internet. Forums like the IGF play a pivotal role in bringing all actors and stakeholders together and facilitating substantive discussions around these matters. I'd like here to applaud the IGF for its continuing intercessional work on the theme policy options for connecting and enabling the next billion. And I look forward to discussion of on the Phase 2 report later in the week. As we get more people and more things online, challenges will not go away. With trends like the Internet of Things, the Internet will become more complex and hence more prone to security threats. Just recently, surveillance cameras and baby monitor devices were used in a DDoS attack against one of the major DNS infrastructure providers. Unfortunately, we should expect more of these attacks going forward. At ICANN, we've been busy for the past 2.5 years working on proposals to transfer the role of stewardship role of the U.S. government in relationship to Internet's unique identifiers to the global community. And as many of you know, on October 1st, the contract between ICANN and the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Telecommunication and Information Administration to perform the IANA functions expired. The expiry of the IANA contract marks the transition of the coordination and management of the Internet's unique identifiers to the global stakeholder community. It was tireless work of the global community that made this a reality. The IANA stewardship transition is a validation of the multi-stakeholder model of Internet governance. It has shown that a governance model defined by the inclusion of all voices, including business, academics, technical experts, civil society, governments, and many others, is the best way to assure that the Internet of tomorrow remains as free, open, and accessible as the Internet is today. More work is currently underway to continue to enhance ICANN's accountability mechanisms throughout this phase, which we call Work Stream 2. The focus is on improving transparency and diversity and looking at aspects of jurisdiction and human rights in relationship to ICANN's mission. It's very important that people still stay involved in this work. In closing, I'd like to emphasize that the importance of forums like the IGF in bringing everyone around the table to engage in an open dialogue and around key governance issues may impact the future of the Internet. It may be difficult to predict the future of the Internet. It will most likely evolve in ways that we cannot currently foresee. The one thing that is certain, though, is that it will continue to connect to more people and to become more embedded in our lives than ever before. Thank you again for the opportunity. I hope we all have a very productive week.
Muchas gracias, doctor Crocker. Le paso el piso a su excelencia, doctor Siyabonga Kwele, ministro de Telecomunicaciones y Servicios Postales del Gobierno de Sudáfrica.
Thank you very much. Let me also thank the government and the people of this beautiful country for receiving us. I come from the most southern tip of Africa, South Africa. And as a developing country, we take the Internet as the most important global resource which can help all of us in developed countries to leapfrog in development. So it's in that reason that we support the multi-stakeholder governance within the multilateral governance of the Internet. Just briefly, Chairperson, we are contributing quite a lot to the 3.9 who are unconnected, as Mr. Johnson has put. The reasons are very simple. Firstly, we have predominantly rural communities which are unconnected. Our levels of education are still relatively low incomes, and the majority of the people also still unconnected in our world are women. The main barriers we see where the multi-stakeholders can assist is that the majority of our citizens are still not aware of the actual benefits of the Internet. So the issue of public education and skills development becomes quite important. Just to reiterate the importance of the relevant content. It must be relevant in solving their own problems, but also the language, because few of our citizens are speaking these languages like English. They've got their own languages which they are very dominant in our society. Of course, the issue of confidence and security in the use of Internet. We still face quite a lot of challenges in terms of access, in all respects of access. The cost of the devices are very inhibiting, and they are keeping quite a lot of our citizens from accessing the Internet. But more critically, we still face with the issues of power. The connectivity in terms of electricity to power these devices is still challenging, although we are improving, we are investing quite a lot in this, in line with the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. How do we see the role of this multi-stakeholder participation? We see it as a private-public partnership. Firstly, to massify the skills development in terms of uptake of the Internet. I think that will be very helpful. Secondly, is development of relevant applications so that we can solve local problems. If we solve local problems, more of our people will take the Internet because Internet is a big economy. Thirdly, is local production of affordable devices. Just lastly, Chairperson, as a South African government, we see Internet as a basic right That's why most of our municipalities, they are giving this as a basic package, free package, so that as a method of access, particularly to those who are poor, giving a basic package of access to free basic Wi-Fi. So those are some of the things we think we should continue to collaborate as multi-stakeholders, particularly private sector, academia, and governments, so that we can solve some of these challenges, so that we can also leapfrog to development together as nations. Thank you.
Excelencia Cuele, muchas gracias. El ingeniero Hossam El Gamal, presidente del IDSC.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Chair, and Excellencies, my colleagues. My name is Hossam El Gamal. I have been appointed a year ago as chairman of the Information and Decision Support Center in the Egyptian cabinet. Prior to that, I was an SME owner, and I was representing the private business community in Africa through AFICTA and internationally as a leader in the ICC basis. And I was nominated in the MAG as a MAG member for 3 years. And I have to share the fact that it was a great journey, exchanging knowledge, experience, best practices, and preparing best suitable policies to secure sustainable development through internet enablement and governance. I would like to echo what my colleague from South Africa just said. Many of what he said, I exactly support. In fact, last year, IGF efforts were recognized and appreciated by the UN General Assembly, and a new 10 years mandate was strongly approved. Our challenge now is to secure inclusive development results, serving sustainable development goals, and having clear KPIs for measurements. Developing countries have been investing in access and are encouraged to do so. But we need to move from outputs-based to outcomes-based, as we don't have the option to do otherwise to achieve required sustainable growth. We need to establish standards for measurement for internet in education, in health, in commerce, in SME growth, in gender balance, in inclusiveness in each of our countries. We suggest more to be done to ensure exchange of localized best practices between developing countries. We suggest more support and focus on international policies related to cybersecurity. We also believe more multi-stakeholder cooperation is required to support more local content delivery, serving cultural enrichment and language preservation. Further engagement is appreciated to support a healthy ecosystem for local SMEs and for internet industry, enabling further job creation, SMEs empowerment, export growth, inclusiveness, and government modernization. Finally, I want to thank UNDESA, the government of Mexico, and my colleagues from the MAG for the extremely tremendous effort that is exerted to have such a lucrative forum, and I wish you a very successful one. Thank you.
Ingeniero El Gamal, muchas gracias a usted. Ahora con nosotros la doctora María Elena Estavillo, comisionada del Instituto Federal de Telecomunicaciones de México. Bienvenida.
Muchas gracias y buenas tardes a todos. Me complace mucho formar parte de esta mesa con tantos expertos, con una diversidad de puntos de vista. Y la pregunta que nos trae en esta primera ronda es cuál es la relevancia de este modelo de múltiples partes interesadas para tratar los temas, los retos que nos presenta el Internet. Y yo partiría de la reflexión de que cuando tratamos el tema de Internet, estamos pensando en una variedad de cuestiones dependiendo de nuestra extracción, de nuestra experiencia, y algunos pensamos en competencia, otros en inversión, en cobertura, en inclusión, innovación, derecho a la información, acceso, privacidad, seguridad. Es una amplitud de objetivos la que tenemos centrada en el ecosistema de Internet. Y esto nos genera unos retos muy grandes para lograr aquellas acciones que puedan lograr el mejor balance entre estos objetivos, porque ciertamente que tenemos que hablar de compromisos entre la diversidad de objetivos, porque, pues bueno, muchas veces al tomar acciones que privilegian a alguno, estamos descuidando otro. Y esta es la riqueza que nos ofrece este tipo de foros, en donde podemos tener los diferentes puntos de vista y preocupaciones para no descuidar ninguno de estos aspectos. Y así como el balance entre objetivos que tenemos que cuidar, pues también tenemos que lograr un balance entre herramientas, las herramientas que tenemos a la mano desde diferentes tipos de plataformas, desde las tradicionales herramientas reguladoras hasta esquemas que vengan de la sociedad civil, aprovechando de hecho las mismas capacidades del Internet para generar herramientas colaborativas apoyadas en los ciudadanos, y además donde cuidemos el balance de el apoyo a las cuestiones de oferta con las de la demanda, porque tenemos que asegurar en todos los casos que esta inclusión de la sociedad y principalmente de los grupos marginados sea una realidad, y que verdaderamente aprovechemos esta gran oportunidad que nos brinda el Internet para incorporar a los grupos que han estado marginados del desarrollo y de las oportunidades económicas. Y para ello tenemos que tomar acciones decididas. Tenemos que tomar acciones para que el Internet sea esta herramienta para disminuir las diferencias, para disminuir las distancias. Y para ello esta reunión de múltiples partes interesadas es la promesa más poderosa que tenemos para lograr estos objetivos.
Doctora, muchísimas gracias. Le paso la palabra a Su Excelencia Hasanul Hakinu, Ministro de Información del Ministerio de Información de Bangladesh. Bienvenido.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, distinguished guest excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me greet you on behalf of 160 million people of Bangladesh, and where Bangladesh at the moment is ranked third in freelance IT and IT-enabled services outsourcing globally. Out of a population of 160 million, we have our over 133 million mobile users, over 54 million net users. 99% of the land geographically has a coverage of voice and data connectivity. Over 5,000 service access points in the villages. Over 14 million Facebook users. Every 20 seconds, a new user is added. 25,000 web portals of the government departments are active. Bangladesh has already overtaken India and Pakistan in terms of net usage. Still, we are far behind, but it is possible because of the dynamic leadership of our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who is chairing a national body with the model of multi-stakeholderism to take decisions. We are successful so far because we are following 4 smart techniques. Human rights development, number 2, connecting the citizens, 3rd, digital government for pro-poor services, and ICT for business. Having said that, let me draw your attention to 6 major problems rocking the world: environment and climate change, information and communication technology, terrorism, poverty, gender disparity, the sustainable development goals to be reached by the year 2030. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we must need to address these 6 major issues on our way to attain inclusive, sustainable development growth through internet governance. Here, no doubt, everybody will agree that the internet and internet economy do enhance sustainable development. ICTs are key enablers of development across the pillars of sustainable developments. But the question is internet and internet economy sustainable? For enhancing SDGs, we need sustainable internet, need to build an inclusive, people-centered information society where the challenge of net to the next billion and the last billion will have to be tackled. Well, ladies and gentlemen, digital economy so far is developing without a proper digital infrastructure, with proper legal, regulatory and technical regimes. A glass house is in the making by internet, where it is threatened by cyber criminals. We need to secure this glass house, otherwise the glass house will be compromised. Concentration of global north-based international e-commerce is a threat to the tax revenues of the global south. Needs to have a fair and equitable collection of and distribution of tax revenues around the world. Also, digital marketplace globally is expanding, but without a regulatory framework that supports innovative, sustainable growth with an aim to harmonize national regulation versus global business objectives, cross-border trade, keeping the net affordable in all markets. Having said that, I think to go for an inclusive, sustainable development, we need to have a sustainable internet and internet economy. And for that, multi-stakeholderism is necessary. I put forward 10 proposals for your consideration to develop a sustainable internet and internet economy. Number 1, affordable internet, accessible internet. I don't explain because everybody knows that. Safe internet, where reliability of the hardware and the software is to be ensured, privacy and data protection is to be ensured, adoption of laws for safe cyberspace to make the internet an instrument of peace and development and not an instrument of terror, ensuring a universal human rights for all in the internet, and keeping the world free from cyberphobia. Number 4, adoption of enabling laws to remove internet application roadblocks at national and international levels. 5, removing any democracy deficit in the governance of internet. 2, we should promote net neutrality, adoption of multi-stakeholderism regime, and expediting INA transition process, etc. 6, capacity building of institutions. 7 is ICT literacy. 8 is content development in mother tongue. 9 is digital economy and trade, which I have already told. And 10 is internet should be treated as a basic human right and a constitutional right. Having said that, let me conclude by saying that in the past days, whatever might have been the source of power, now in this age of ICT, power flows from the click of a mouse with a fingertip, and we must click with caution. The famous American journalist Bill Moyers said, "Ideas are great arrows, but there has to be a bow, and politics is the bow of idealism, bow of politics." Now it is our time to shoot time-worthy idea arrows with our internet bows based on multi-stakeholderism. We must keep our struggle on to ensure internet as a basic need for human rights we must move on to make it accessible for all, because we know an encaged internet system cannot be a positive factor for growth.
Your Excellency, can I ask you to conclude, please?
Just 1 minute, second.
Thank you so much.
Therefore, I conclude by saying that at the moment we need a cyber treaty and a cyber security treaty and a democratic governance of the internet based on multi-stakeholderism. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Les quisiera recordar, el tiempo que tenemos para esta sesión es estricto. Tenemos 3 horas para responder las 2 preguntas. Esto está marcado bajo las reglas del protocolo también. Los traductores están aquí solamente ese tiempo. Entonces le pido a mis colegas de la mesa que sean muy cuidadosos y muy resumidos en sus puntos. La siguiente pregunta, la respuesta la espero mucho más cortas de todos. Creo que todos en la mesa nos hemos pasado un poquito de tiempo y espero que podamos acelerar un poco las respuestas en respeto a nuestro tiempo y el de nuestra audiencia. Le cedo la palabra a la ingeniera Aida Holz, la integrante honoraria de la Junta Directiva de la GESIC. Bienvenido.
Buenas tardes, soy Ida, no Ada, y estoy muy contenta de estar en México, país que nos recibió hace años y donde viví más de una década. Bueno, voy a ser cortita. Buscando las respuestas a esta pregunta que encontré sobre la influencia de los intereses diversos en la participación, encontré que, bueno, sí, que es muy bueno que una variedad de intereses pueda participar de manera significativa en las discusiones. Se obtienen mejores respuestas a las preguntas globales de esta manera. Sin duda es cierto, pero ¿qué tipo de expertos estamos convocando y cuánto puede influir en las decisiones políticas nacionales en un mundo tan variado? Internet es sin duda un medio de comunicación, de acercamiento, de globalización. Nadie imaginó alguna vez cuánto cambiaría la humanidad esta tecnología, cuánto desarrollo tendríamos. Y caminamos sin duda aceleradamente hacia un mundo digital e interconectado y necesitamos incluir a todos los elementos de la sociedad. No obstante, yo me pregunto si estamos abarcando todos los campos de la vida y de la sociedad, además de los ya tan mencionados actualmente y en este foro, y si existe la posibilidad de incidir en todos los ámbitos de la sociedad internacional. En estos elementos yo incluyo el modelo, incluyo la ayuda en el estudio y propuesta de la diversidad de temas que afectan la vida social, pero aún no encontramos su forma de aplicación en todos los campos del conocimiento, ya que no hay conciencia clara de la necesidad de planificación para el cambio a los niveles altos en nuestros países, en muchos de nuestros países. Unos ejemplos es, por ejemplo, mi pequeño país es el Uruguay, es pequeñito, líder en América Latina en el desarrollo del gobierno digital, con conciencia de la necesidad de cambio. Aún no se ha conseguido implantar algunas leyes de carácter social que condigan con el desarrollo tecnológico y tampoco hemos avanzado en la reformulación del mundo laboral, que es tan importante para adaptarnos a la nueva era y para adaptar a la sociedad toda, ni hemos adaptado la educación a la nueva era, no obstante el gran esfuerzo de inclusión realizado con el Plan Ceibal, que es un proyecto que entrega computadoras a todos los niños de la educación pública. Estos computadores se los llevan a su casa, lo que ha constituido una parte muy importante en la inclusión digital, ya que los niños que van a las escuelas públicas no son los más económicamente favorecidos y hemos incluido a la gente, a esas familias con dificultades económicas, de tal manera que la curva de acceso a a Internet se ha juntado entre los niveles más altos y los más bajos económicamente. Yo no tengo respuestas, pero sí sé que hay que profundizar cómo, a través de los grupos de múltiples partes interesadas, que sin duda son beneficiosos para tener ideas claras, podemos avanzar en las brechas que hoy hay en las diferentes formas del quehacer social, legal, laboral y fundamentalmente en la educación, que es nuestro futuro. Gracias.
Gracias, ingeniero. Tenemos con nosotros al señor Vint Cerf, vicepresidente senior y evangelista de Internet en jefe en Google.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I will try to draw to your attention the reason why I come to the Internet Governance Forum. I'm an engineer. I love problems. I like to solve problems. And there are lots of them that come to the table at IGF. What's important about the IGF is the participation is broad. People come here with economic problems, with social problems, with technical problems, with legal problems, and they lay out an extraordinary menu of them, thanks to the multi-stakeholder advisory group, which puts together the program. The value of having all of those different stakeholders observing the effect of the Internet on their countries, their citizens, their companies, and their social environment is exactly why IGF is so important. I always look for reasons why certain things happen. Usually there's an incentive hiding behind people's behavior, behind the behavior of governments, behind the behavior of companies. If you don't like the behaviors, the best way to deal with it is find a way to change the incentives. From the engineering point of view, a lot of the problems that we hear about deserve technical response. But many of the problems that we discuss here at IGF involve other kinds of responses, whether it's business policy, economic policy, transnational data transfers, exchange of information, exchange of value. All of these issues are going to have to be addressed by a rather broad range of parties, not just the engineers. I wish it were the case that the engineers could solve everything, but I will confess to you in public, I don't think we can, but we can try to help. So what's important about IGF from my point of view is that all of you and all of you sitting around this table articulate the problems that need attention and maybe hint at where and how they can be addressed. We can't solve the problems here in the IGF. It's not organized around that idea. But you can articulate them and help us understand where we can best address those issues. And that's what I look for in my response to why the multi-stakeholder model is so important and why the IGF needs to continue its work. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor Cerf, por su contribución y por su atención al detalle del tiempo. El primero que nos dona un par de segundos. Adelante el señor Gonzalo Navarro, director de la Asociación Latinoamericana de Internet. Bienvenido.
Muchas gracias, Víctor. Bueno, Vint hablaba acerca de problemas y uno de los problemas que yo no he podido solucionar es qué hago y qué digo después de que Vint Cerf dijo lo que dijo. Déjenme presentarme. Soy Gonzalo Navarro, soy director ejecutivo de la Asociación Latinoamericana de Internet, que es una organización que agrupa a empresas que proveen servicios sobre Internet en Latinoamérica y el Caribe. Agradecemos la oportunidad de estar acá, especialmente al Gobierno de México y por la organización de este evento que está realmente muy bien puesto y obviamente requiere mucho sacrificio, mucho esfuerzo, especialmente en un país de Latinoamérica, así que muchas gracias. En atención al tiempo, y sé que tenemos poco, voy a ser breve y voy a ir al grano. Respecto a las bondades del modelo de múltiples partes interesadas, multi-stakeholder, y cómo se plasma en este tipo de procesos internacionales como el IGF, la respuesta parece ser bastante simple respecto de cómo funciona en cuanto a la inclusión. El modelo de múltiples partes interesadas no es una idea ni futurista ni etérea o que sea difícil de hacer o de llevar a la práctica, todo lo contrario. Es una realidad que se encuentra plasmada precisamente en lo que estamos haciendo en este foro hoy en día, teniendo distintos actores, distintas visiones, distintas personas con opiniones respecto de lo que debería ser la administración, por ejemplo, de recursos críticos de Internet o sobre la gobernanza de Internet. Eso es lo que hacemos. También se plasma en procesos internacionales de extrema complejidad que han sido felizmente llevados a cabo, como por ejemplo ha sido la transición de Ayana, que la comunidad de ICANN llevó a cabo con mucho esfuerzo después de 2 años. Son esfuerzos tangibles, son realidades tangibles que tenemos hoy en día y que se refieren a la forma de trabajar a través de un proceso multi-stakeholder. En mi opinión, el proceso de múltiples partes interesadas es una nueva forma de entender e integrar visiones respecto a este tipo de procesos y, por supuesto, de entender cómo las distintas opiniones agregan valor en la forma y en la toma de decisiones que finalmente llevan adelante las autoridades. En momentos que avanzamos hacia una cada vez más completa digitalización de nuestras actividades, de la economía, incluso de la forma que tenemos de ver y enfrentar la vida, es necesario internalizar que el modelo multi-stakeholder o de múltiples partes interesadas es parte del ADN de lo que es Internet. Este ADN que es un ADN abierto, interoperable, resiliente y que entendemos que este tiene que ser un pilar que no solamente debe ser preservado, sino que tiene que ser fomentado por todos nosotros. El éxito de Internet como una herramienta facilitadora descansa en gran medida, como ustedes saben, en el libre flujo de información y de ideas que se encuentra reflejada en el modelo multi-stakeholder. Y como una organización del sector privado, nosotros celebramos y damos la bienvenida a que esta manera de entender y de llevar a cabo procesos internacionales cada vez tenga más éxito y hacemos votos porque de esta manera esta situación se mantenga no solamente en el plano internacional como en los procesos que les mencioné, sino que cada vez más se ha integrado en la toma de decisiones a escala nacional, porque entendemos que es una forma práctica, sana y viable, y sobre todo en los tiempos que corren, de otorgar legitimidad a la toma de decisiones. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Gonzalo. Adelante la señora Moira Paz Estenso, representante en México del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo.
Voy a tener que hacer una aclaración. Soy representante de CAF, el Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina. Y justamente quería solamente comenzar agradeciendo la invitación, porque la misión de un Banco de Desarrollo, tanto sea del BID, del Banco Interamericano, o del nuestro, el Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina, CAF, es reducir la pobreza, es la inclusión, es el desarrollo sostenible, y la única forma de poder lograr esto es reduciendo las desigualdades. Y las desigualdades en todo nivel. Obviamente hoy día el Internet, la discusión que se lleva hoy día a cabo es un tema transversal para todos los temas, para lograr justamente una mejora, para lograr la inclusión y sobre todo la realización plena de los habitantes de los países, de nuestros países. Para todo esto nosotros vemos de que la inversión en infraestructura es fundamental. La inversión en infraestructura para poder lograr la conectividad, para poder lograr la inclusión, es por lo menos de 6% del PIB al año. Hoy día en América Latina solamente se invierte en infraestructura en el 3%. Y eso crea las asimetrías, las diferencias. En Asia se está invirtiendo más del 9% en infraestructura y América Latina 3%. Eso está creando las grandes asimetrías, y no solamente a nivel continental, pero sí también dentro de nuestros propios países. Y tomando en cuenta las necesidades que existen, obviamente no podemos pensar que solo el sector privado puede solucionar esto, sino la participación del sector público, de la academia, de las universidades, hace parte de la solución de estos problemas. Y quería decir que como CAF, Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina, apoyamos a los países en fortalecer y la elaboración de políticas públicas, en la preparación y financiamiento de proyectos de infraestructura, así también como de telecomunicaciones, como capacidad técnica, promoviendo las asociaciones público-privadas, los sistemas de emprendedores y de innovación para una transformación productiva. Si no hay trabajo, no se elimina la pobreza. Y si no hay dignidad, no hay ciudadanía. Hoy día estamos hablando de Internet justamente por el tema de haber creado, aquí tenemos al inventor del Internet, haber creado ciudadanos. Hoy día podemos decir que todos los que tenemos información a través de este medio somos ciudadanos plenos, exigimos nuestros derechos y también podemos realizar nuestros deberes con una forma mucho más fácil. CAF, para finalizar simplemente, está trabajando ya con CEPAL y con Cisco en una estrategia de conectividad de las aulas de clase a la banda ancha. Eso viene a traer un cambio estructural en nuestros países y se puede lograr en cortos tiempos de 2 a 3 años. Muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad de estar aquí.
Muchas gracias, señora Moira Paz Estensoro. Representante en México del Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina, de CAF. Adelante, Megan Richards, asesora principal de la Dirección General de Redes de Comunicación, Contenido y Tecnología de la Comisión Europea. Bienvenida.
Muchas gracias, Víctor. Voy a hablar en inglés para estar un poco más corto, en 3 minutos. So I'm going to speak in English to be a bit quicker. Almost everything that I wanted to say has already been said, and that's part of the problem of being at the end of the alphabet. I'm going to use my husband's name from now on, because then I'll be closer to the beginning. But so I'm going to just address 2 aspects, which again have already been raised, and a third one that no one has talked about. The first one relates to the importance of internationalized domain names and the use of local languages. I think this is a most important aspect in assuring that we reach and stop the digital divide and addressing the digital divide. In Europe, we have, in the European Union, 23 official languages, in addition to the many regional languages, local languages, etc. Many of our languages which are written in Latin script also have funny letters or additions of accents like umlauts or cedillas or accent grave, accent aigu, etc. In addition, we have 2 other scripts, both Bulgarian and Greek, so we recognize and understand, particularly just in Europe, how important it is to have access to the internet in your local language and also in scripts that you can read and understand. So I think this is an area where we can really make a big difference in addressing the digital divide, and this has been raised by Steve Crocker and also the minister from South Africa. That's one point. The other one that I want to address particularly relates to WSIS. I mean, WSIS was let's call it the placenta for the IGF itself. And the WSIS Plus 10 review also gave the IGF its new mandate. Many of you have mentioned how important it is as a multi-stakeholder forum, but I think there's one aspect too that I want to underline with respect to the WSIS Plus 10 outcome document, and which was in the original WSIS document as well. And that's that the multi-stakeholder approach must ensure that we have stakeholders who participate according to their roles and responsibilities. So there's been a lot of complaints about experts over the last years, particularly in the political domain. But everyone is an expert according to his or her roles and responsibilities, and that's why we have to exchange and ensure that everyone understands different perspectives. That's the second point. And the third one that no one has talked about, because it's a particularly European issue, is something that we call the Global Internet Policy Observatory, or GIPO. And this is something that the European Commission has developed to ensure that many more stakeholders can participate on a better footing to have better access and understand internet governance more. So that's my last point, and I will stop there. I get an extra second next time.
Claro que sí, señora Megan Richards. Adelante, señor Oscar Robles, director ejecutivo del ACNIC. Bienvenido.
Muchas gracias, Víctor. Primero que nada, quiero felicitar a México, a Presidencia de México, por el esfuerzo para traer este evento. Me parece que ello traerá beneficios al desarrollo de Internet, sin duda alguna. Agradezco también la invitación y el honor de estar en esta mesa con verdaderos expertos en el tema y en el modelo multi-stakeholder. Tratando de responder la primera pregunta, creo que el reto está claro, no necesariamente la solución. Para reducir la brecha digital, lo primero que necesitamos es no desconectar a los ya conectados y conectar a los que no están conectados. Por muchos años no nos preocupamos de los primeros, no nos preocupamos de aquellos usuarios que eventualmente se desconectaban por alguna u otra razón, porque la cantidad de nuevos conectados siempre excedía a los nuevos usuarios. Me parece que tenemos que empezar a poner atención a esos desafíos porque empieza a dejar de ser redituable para algunas empresas el conectar a algunos de los que hoy ya están conectados, y ese es el reto del Estado, ese es el reto del desafío de los Estados, cómo asegurarse que los incentivos, como mencionaba Vincent, son los adecuados para mantener a los conectados y cómo llevar proyectos de conectividad a los no conectados. Y todo esto no se puede hacer de manera como tradicionalmente se conectaron a los millones y miles de millones de usuarios de Internet que hoy tenemos conectados, con proyectos de ingeniería, la mayoría de ellos proyectos de ingeniería. Hoy se requieren proyectos mucho más complejos, mucho más completos, con múltiples habilidades, con múltiples actores y múltiples partes interesadas. El Estado, como les decía, tiene el desafío de convertir, de generar esos incentivos para que esto siga siendo negocio cuando tenga que ser negocio, desarrollar proyectos de inclusión social también que sean de manera sostenible. Un reto adicional que tenemos, además, es el asegurar que el Internet del que todos hablamos se mantenga cercano a los principios fundamentales con los que fueron creados. Cuando nosotros, muchos de los aquí presentes, nos conectamos a Internet, recibimos 65.536 posibilidades de conexión y de innovación en cada dispositivo. Hoy existe el riesgo de que los nuevos usuarios que se conecten no reciban ese Internet, que no reciban ese Internet con esas posibilidades, por temas de cero rating o inclusive porque no están desplegados los nuevos protocolos de direccionamiento necesarios para mantenerse conectado a todo Internet como IPv6. Y entonces todo esto requiere de múltiples partes interesadas. Y no he terminado con los desafíos. Tenemos también que tener la capacidad y habilidad para regresarle la confianza a los muchos millones de usuarios que la han perdido porque se sienten con fundamento y con argumentos, se sienten sobrevigilados. Por eso todo esto requiere de manera necesaria e inevitable el modelo multi-stakeholder. Considero que las diversas entidades que estamos aquí presentes y que participamos de estos esfuerzos del IGF tenemos la gran responsabilidad de asegurar, de resolver estos desafíos y solo así lograremos que el Internet siga siendo de beneficio para toda la sociedad. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Oscar. Adelante, Su Excelencia y amigo Daniel Sepúlveda, el embajador y subsecretario de Estado adjunto y coordinador de Comunicaciones Internacionales y Políticas de Información de los Estados Unidos Americanos.
Thank you very much, Victor. I want to thank you personally, both for your leadership and your friendship, and I want to thank your nation for the same. When we talk about inclusion and the multi-stakeholder model and what it offers, first of all, I think that we should note that everyone at the table has expressed support for their multi-stakeholder model. That's in and of itself progress. Since Victor and I met, I believe that the IGF has become itself a dramatically more inclusive event and bringing into more voices, more opinions, more points of view, and more issues to the table. So when we talk about inclusion going forward, we talk about inclusion from a policy outcomes perspective, such as everybody needs to have access, to from a process perspective, everybody needs to participate in how we achieve that global access. And I think it's the second that gives legitimacy to the first. If the process itself is not multi-stakeholder and participatory, it denies legitimacy to the actual outcome and leaves others to blame if there's failure. The accountability and buy-in that comes from the multi-stakeholder process is in and of itself a value. Now, why do we, the United States, support the multi-stakeholder process? Because we believe that when inclusion has occurred, it has occurred as a function of multi-stakeholder participation and as a function of multi-stakeholder driven solutions. So take, for example, I was in Chile last week visiting a project called Laboratoria, which is actually a Peruvian-based project started by a group of students out of Columbia University who are now have educated 400 young women from low-income backgrounds into highly skilled web developers and tripled their income using a 6-month boot camp project. Now they're not sitting around talking about internet governance, they're exercising it. They're not talking about inclusion, they're engaging in processes that result in it. And they're not doing it by themselves, they're doing it with governments, they're doing it with the private sector, they're doing it with academia. So as we move forward, I would like us to recognize the progress that we've made to date. Re-embrace the multi-stakeholder process. And as we lay claim to its flaws or its inability to reach the solutions that we would like to see have come out, for example, perfect security or perfect egalitarian distribution, let's reinvest in the multi-stakeholder process to achieve those ends. We should not compromise security for a market economy. I don't think anyone has ever argued that we should. But we should also not compromise human freedom under the veil of pursuit of perfect security. And in that process, it requires the participation on as equal a playing field as possible of all interested parties to achieve just ends. And so that is why we've supported it, that's why we'll support it going forward, and that's why we've seen it succeed on the ground.
Muchas gracias, embajador. Adelante la señora Lynn Sanamur, presidenta del Grupo Asesor de Múltiples Partes Interesadas y gran contribuyente de la agenda que vamos a ver en los siguientes días. Gracias, Lynn.
Thank you, Victor. And I'd also like to state publicly again, thanking you for today, for this high-level event, and for Mexico's clear support for the IGF mandate renewal and your clear and early support for hosting an IGF this year. As I said earlier, it did make a significant difference. I'm also sort of trying to find some new points to make, being fairly late in the alphabet here. And maybe I'll just try and underscore one or two specific things. My first experience with what came to be called the multi-stakeholder model was 18 years ago when I joined the Internet Society. And my deepest engagement with that was through the efforts of the Internet Engineering Task Force. One of the things I'm pleased to hear about is that I don't hear people saying the multi-stakeholder model or a multi-stakeholder model, because there is no such thing. There are different practices, there are different priorities, there are different stakeholders, there are different desired outcomes, but the key principle is that there are all stakeholders engaged and that all voices are heard. And I think that's one of the kind of clear messages I'm hearing here. I want to just talk for a minute about certainly one of the advantages, to speak directly to Victor's question, of the multi-stakeholder model is that it surfaces more ideas. But just as importantly, it actually puts the determination of what is best actually in the hands of those directly impacted or those that are responsible for the implementation and have the responsibility to affect those changes. So that's very, very important as well. Decisions and regulations are not taken in a vacuum, that's obvious, but with fuller knowledge. We have these processes because the solutions aren't clear. I liked the phrase earlier, looking for a better balance in the diversities of opinions. You know, I used to say trade-offs. We have to make trade-offs in complex decisions. So another really important component of multi-stakeholder processes is listening. Not just participating, not just engaging, not just bringing your view, but really active listening. That benefit in terms of broadening perceptions and broadening your understanding of other views is where a lot of the value actually comes ultimately from these multi-stakeholder processes. And Maybe I'll just comment quickly on that same. The IGF certainly is a multi-stakeholder process, but ultimately it's really a place to listen and learn. It's about gaining and sharing knowledge. It's about making contacts. It's about learning about different approaches, about being open to different approaches and different points of views. And that is actually what I think will help all of us make a much longer term and more sustainable difference. It's not just about what we do here this week, as important as that is. It really is about learning some of these skills and taking them forward with us as we address our other issues. So thank you, Victor.
Muchas gracias, Lynn. Adelante, señor Shigeki Suzuki, viceministro de Coordinación de Políticas del Ministerio del Interior y Comunicaciones de Japón. Bienvenido.
Mr. Chairman and distinguished guest and related person, it is my great pleasure to hear with you on this wonderful occasion of IGF high-level meeting. I would like to answer to the question one, the advantage of multi-stakeholder model approach. I believe the multi-stakeholder model has several advantages. Firstly, it enables a broader range of actors to reflect their voices directly. Secondly, it guarantees different voices with the same power or influences. Thirdly, because it is not limited to economic rules, we can apply the model to difficult fields such as remote rural areas or low-income citizens where the market mechanism does not work. Fourthly, because it enables independent activities from the government, actors can take flexible approaches and avoid the increasing of the government burden or struggle with inefficiency and the rigidity of government work. And finally, in the case the actors utilize the donations, there can be a different effect of reallocation of national incomes. From such viewpoint, we emphasize the importance of the multi-stakeholder model in the discussion at the G7 ICT ministerial meeting, which Japan hosted in April this year as presidency. And then actually the multi-stakeholder meeting was held on a day just before our ministerial meeting. In this meeting, we comprised 3 policy documents to show the policy principles and action directions. First one, G7 Charter for Digital Connected World. Second is G7 Minister Joint Declaration for Action Plan on implementing the Charter. The third is G7 Opportunities for Cooperations as annexed. In this discussion, the first topics discussions was how to bridge the digital divide and how to improve accessibilities to achieve them. We focused on the following 4 factors. One is building up ICT infrastructure. The second is improving affordability of ICT services. The third is promoting the literacy, and the fourth is respecting the diversity in language and cultures. A solution of these issues apparently requires a multi-stakeholders model where different stakeholders are committed to these tasks from their respective standpoints. Japan is planning to host an open forum tomorrow to introduce wide aspects of the discussion and outcomes of the G7 ICT Minister meeting. I hope that all of you can come and join us to share the fruits of the Access meeting.
Viceministro, le pido concluir. Muchas gracias. Señor Shola Taylor, Secretario General de la Commonwealth Telecommunications Organization.
Thank you, Victor. Let me thank the government of Mexico for this invitation. It does provide an opportunity to have some tequila and to also listen to some mariachi music. Speaking on behalf of the 52-member Commonwealth countries, let me start by saying that we're always honored and glad to join discussions on how IGF can help the various development efforts. I note the theme of this event, enabling inclusive and sustainable growth, is very similar to the one we had last year at a forum in Fiji, which was ICTs for Inclusive Growth. That means, amongst other things, there is now a widely shared view that ICTs can facilitate the rise of more inclusive societies. For us, there are two issues. One is investments in universally accessible and affordable broadband access, and the second is safety of the internet. I therefore cannot but endorse the very clear views expressed by Minister Chwele from South Africa and some of the critical elements by Minister Inu from Bangladesh. With regards to investment in the ICT sector, there are many stakeholders who believe the private sector alone can provide that investment. We do not share that view. We believe that there is a need for public sector strategic investments that will complement those investments. And in the pursuance of activities beyond the Commonwealth, we will be organizing an investment forum for emerging markets in the ICT sector in collaboration with the government of the UAE in Dubai next April, and you're all invited. With regards to the second issue of safety of the internet, what we've done is to ensure that we have a standard. We established a Commonwealth governance model, and we have been able to use this model in several countries, Malawi, Tanzania, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and so on. These models have been very successful, and I really want to thank the government of the UK for the support they have given to us. Earlier this year, we had the Commonwealth ICT ministers that also endorsed the action plan we have, and they also encouraged us to provide capacity building, particularly for women, for the youths, and also for the disadvantaged groups. Finally, I cannot but thank the government of Mexico, and also to recognize the very good work being done by ICANN, the government's advisory groups, and also to thank the US for accelerating the process for the IANA transition process. I thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias. Adelante, señor Paul Wilson, director general del Centro de Información de la Red de Asia-Pacífico.
Gracias a todos. Es un gusto enorme para mí regresar a México para participar en IGF. Lo siento que estoy australiano y necesito usar inglés. I'm from APNIC. We're the Regional Internet Address Registry for the Asia Pacific, and we're part of the technical community of multi-stakeholder internet governance that was mentioned earlier by Yari from the IETF. Like many, for a long time we've been talking about access and inclusion and promoting ICT for D for many years with an aim, for example, of promoting modems, setting up telecentres, things like that, all for the sake of access and inclusion in a new world of ICTs. That went on in the early days for quite a while until we all started thinking that market forces would take over and achieve access for all. So in the last 20 years, market forces did achieve much of this, modems for the masses more or less, but in the meantime, markets in developed countries also produced huge advances in services and technologies that many of us take for granted even here in today's discussion. So I think many people today actually agree that the digital divide is growing bigger and not smaller, and they're calling for more attention to that, for instance, today in the form of ICT for SDGs. So in the Asia Pacific, it's certainly a factor. This is where we're seeing the majority of the global internet growth, and where we expect that status to continue for years to come. It's well understood and very clear in our region especially that there's a huge ongoing demand for human skills to address the digital divide, and is a critical enabler of the infrastructure development itself to develop, which is needed for delivery of access and inclusion. What we also know today, as I said, is that it actually doesn't happen automatically or optimally globally under market forces alone. So many parts of the world do continue to suffer with internet services that are not up to the standard that others assume. As they say, the digital divide has widened in many cases. So a message here, a key message from the technical community is that the difference between an internet service which is stable and fast and cheap and secure and one which is none of these things can be solely a matter of the skills of those who are developing those services. And today in particular, when security is of such a huge importance to all of us, the most important security professionals are those who are building the networks and who really do need to do that job properly. So in the technical community, we're working very hard, not only to build the infrastructure, but to build the human capacity to do that job properly. It's actually in many cases, a civil society activity. It's an activity involving networks of professionals working together, sharing experience and best practice, building the internet at the coalface. And this has been described as an environment of vigorous competition in public, but even more vigorous cooperation in private. Because the internet infrastructure is pretty complex. This is from a technical community point of view. But in fact, it's a sum total of many, many efforts. It includes businesses and governments and development agencies making the sorts of public sector investments that we just heard about, but also the technical community bodies, the professional networks, the civil society organisations, effectively like ours. So I've got a technical community viewpoint of what we need to do, but it's no less a multi-stakeholder viewpoint, because this is work that we need to keep doing together, both in our homes and in this ongoing discussion at IGF. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Señor Alex Wong, director de Alianzas para los Desafíos Globales del Foro Económico Mundial. Adelante.
Thank you, Victor. So A for Alex, W for Wong, so I'm last. A next time. I'll just simply say, for the World Economic Forum, multi-stakeholder collaboration isn't only advantageous, it's absolutely essential. That's our core mission. And I'll give 3 examples of what we're doing in this space that reflect that in the area of Internet for All, or connecting the unconnected. The first is, we made this one of the major projects of the forum last year, and we worked on first putting together a framework, working with many of you in the room and many at this table, to put together a very simple framework that needs to be approached, needs to be adopted to address this issue. And our framework basically has 4 components: infrastructure, affordability, skills and awareness, and relevant content. If you don't have all 4 of those, you're not going to address the issue. And by default, the only way you can address all 4 is to have a multi-stakeholder approach, because no single one actor can address that. The second point would be, we've taken that framework, again, working with many of the partners in this room and in this conference, down to countries, working in partnership with government to try to then turn this framework into action. How can we create these partnerships on the ground? And indeed, what we found, as many of our government leaders on the table would agree, is that very quickly the conversation turns into what are the outcomes that Internet for All can enable. And when we talk about issues like financial inclusion or e-commerce or healthcare, inevitably you have to you again need to include all stakeholders together, not just across the different sectors, but within the sectors. You need healthcare companies sitting with banks, sitting with the actual service providers and the technology providers. The final point I'll then make is, globally, we at this table have to walk the talk by backing this up, and doing that in actual countries, one at a time, working in coordination. And the final example of that is that we did hold our first working meeting in Argentina as one of our country programs. And we were very pleased that we did that in partnership not just with the government, but also with the Global Connect Initiative and also with the Inter-American Development Bank. And frankly, it could have been everyone else who's been doing this kind of work. And why that was important came to me as a remark that our colleague at the government of Argentina, Secretary Clarissa Estel, said to us, is it was great to see you all put aside your egos so you could work together and in coordination. And I think that's the sort of spirit that we have to continue to make sure we address this issue. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Adelante el doctor Lenny Montiel, subsecretario general para el Desarrollo Económico del Departamento de Asuntos Económicos y Sociales de Naciones Unidas.
Ok, bueno, gracias. I mean, after everything that has been said, is impossible to say there is no question. Participation, cooperation, collaboration, and a place where everybody can come and have an open, transparent, and effective conversation about how to solve problems that are common is incredible. We have that space. That is the forum. That is the Internet Governance Forum. It's a space where we all can come and do that without restrictions, without thinking about what to negotiate or not. And believe me, when we think about how do we have to negotiate things, things can get complicated. I will speak just as a person that is sharing experiences with you, and as you can imagine, I go to a lot of meetings where people try to negotiate things. The nature of the conversation that takes place in the IGF every year is very unique. You cannot find this space very often, where you find governments, civil society, academia, private sector, non-governmental organization, sharing their experiences, sharing their problems, sharing their challenges. So, as Ambassador Sepúlveda said, this is a place where we can learn of concrete, very specific, very unique examples of how Internet is promoted in a very concrete experience in Chile. But in the same way, we can learn many other things. Now, what I believe keeps coming up as a challenge, and I share this with you as a personal observation, is this question of whether the IGF as a multi-stakeholder space for debate, exchange of knowledge, exchange of experience, etc., is also a place for a multi-stakeholder problem-solving action. And in that sense, I will strongly support what was said by Vincent, Professor Vincent, some minutes ago. We cannot solve the problems at IGF. So we need to separate those two spaces. One thing is, let's make maximal possible use of the space we have for exchanging experiences, for letting know what we think, and for knowing what others think. And that, per se, is an incredible achievement. And let's go back, each of us, to our own spaces and try to make decisions at our own level, through our own decision-making possibilities, and try to contribute from that perspective. I hope this is a way of highlighting how important it is to keep the Internet Governance Forum as it is, a forum for exchange of spaces, and not try to see something different in it. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, subsecretario. Y con eso terminamos la primera ronda de respuestas. De verdad, una gran participación. Se ve la inversión en tiempo y la propuesta, los puntos en concordancia y también el debate que se está generando. La segunda pregunta me gustaría proponerles, y de verdad aquí ya platicamos, también responderla un poquito más en corto. Tenemos 2 minutos. Voy a cambiar un poquito el orden, también en respeto a los colegas en la mesa, en respeto a la audiencia, y también muy importante en respeto a la traducción que se está generando. Necesitamos terminar a tiempo. Un encargo muy especial a todos. Los esfuerzos de la comunidad global están dirigidos a un escenario en el que cada vez haya más personas conectadas a Internet. ¿Qué conjunto de habilidades deberán tener las personas para lograr una inclusión total en diversos aspectos, incluyendo el económico? Muchas gracias, empezando por el señor Malcolm Johnson, vicesecretario general de la UIT.
Thank you, Victor, for the second question. Well, it's true that the global community is making a tremendous effort to bring all people online. However, technology is moving at an ever faster rate and new innovations are coming along almost every week. So it's more and more difficult for the developing countries, especially the least developed countries, to keep up. And in fact, they have to run faster and faster just to keep up. So digital skills are lacking there, but they're also lacking, of course, in developed countries. And these skills are necessary not only to be aware of what services are available, such as e-health, e-commerce, e-education, but also what technologies and what technical standards can be used to provide these services. And the requirements for these in developing countries are often very different to those requirements in developed countries. This means that they need people with the skills to participate in the development of technical standards to ensure that their own specific requirements are included in those standards and understand how to implement them. Furthermore, with the growing development of accessibility technologies, persons with disabilities can experience a rapid and meaningful inclusion in social and economic life. So people need the skills to bring these accessible technologies to people with disabilities. Another important issue is the low level of financial inclusion in many countries. Globally, 2 billion people don't have access to a bank account. And it's estimated that of these 2 billion, 1.6 billion have mobile phones. So this has been addressed in ITU, and a focus group on financial inclusion will conclude this week with some recommendations of how to address this and a call for global collaboration to develop the skills necessary to ensure that people throughout the world can participate in the digital economy. We look forward to working with all, and especially now that we have 140 universities, members of ITU, to work with them and others to bring these skills to all the people throughout the world. Thank you, Victor.
Muchas gracias. A for Alex. Please. Señor Alex Wong, director de Alianzas para los Desafíos Globales del Foro Económico Mundial.
So be careful what you ask for. So I will then focus, in my view, skills and awareness would be the areas that we have to focus on. Statistics that we took, and others can add to this and give deeper meaning, 15% of adults are illiterate. So if you have this literacy issue, how can people use the internet? And secondly, the gender issue of the fact that, and many of you know the Broadband Commission report has shown the gender divide is widening again. And there's a lot of cultural issues around allowing women or girls to be on the internet. So I will just make my intervention very brief to focus on addressing, getting people aware of the internet or being able to access the internet. We'll let them then be creative and get this and learn how to use it based on just human creativity and entrepreneurial skills. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Alex. El señor Paul Wilson, director general del Centro de Información de la Red de Asia-Pacífico. Adelante.
Thank you again. I would really have to echo what Malcolm Johnson said before and Alex Wong about skills development, but I'd place again a really high priority on the need for skills development amongst those who we are relying on to provide the services that we are all hoping to take for granted, and that is in particular in the security area, that we cannot have secure and stable and cost-effective services without those people who are being charged with that responsibility from being able to do that properly. And it will be a huge missed opportunity, and every day, in fact, that we endure without the skills to take advantage of what's available to us in terms of infrastructure being deployed, the ability to develop competitive, modern internet services on which, as I say, all of this depends. Every day that we go without those skills being available, it's a missed opportunity and also a risk in terms of security, in terms of faith and confidence in the internet, which I think we're hearing is a lot of people are saying is being undermined these days. So again, I would really make that the key focus, that we must have the skills, the human skills capacities available to do this job properly. Thanks.
Gracias, Paul Wilson. Señor Shola Taylor, secretario general de Organización de Telecomunicaciones de la Mancomunidad. Adelante.
Thank you very much. Capacity building, that's what we do every day. It's so important. 3 times a year, we bring very senior officials from our member countries, and it's amazing how much knowledge they need. They are very hungry for policy options, regulatory options. So this has to be done on a continuous basis. Our governments need to be educated, to be aware of all the issues. Secondly, bridging the access gaps. We've seen initiatives taken by Facebook, for example, in trying to bridge some gaps. Governments also have to come in. The UK government, in spite of its developments, pumps billions of pounds to bridge access back in the UK. So many of our countries have to understand that government has to put in money to support what the private sector is doing. Finally, entrepreneurship amongst the youths. Youths are coming out, no jobs. We need to help them. We need to engage them with the financiers to help them develop applications. And that's one of the reasons why we want to organize this event, to bring the partnerships, the investors, those who want projects to be funded, and to see that this growth can be achieved. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Señor Shigeaki Suzuki, viceministro de la Coordinación de Políticas del Ministerio del Interior y Comunicaciones de Japón.
To enjoy the benefit of digitalization, everyone will need to operate terminals, get connected, extract necessary information, and make use of it. The skill required for the purpose seems to be changing according to the development of network and services. At the same time, we see much more complexity in the user environment, such as service contract and risk station in information security. In particular, people who are having lower skills are getting more involved. Online crimes targeting those users and increasing. In addition, everybody can publicize personal information now, and the risk for users of getting involved in accident or crimes is increasing by spreading personal information without careful examinations. Therefore, I expect such a skill to use internet safely will be more and more important, including an appropriate understanding of how to handle personal information and how to ensure security during internet use. And from the viewpoint of supporting users in developing such skills, including awareness raising, I believe the role of multi-stakeholder will be increasingly more important, and we governments should strengthen collaboration with their shareholders. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Adelante, señora Lynn Santamur, presidente del Grupo Asesor de Múltiples Partes Interesadas. Y solo una pequeña nota. Estoy obviamente recorriendo el orden al revés para que estemos listos los que no se habían dado cuenta. Adelante, Lynn.
Sorry, me? Apologies, Victor, I took my earphones out. I would strongly concur with many of the comments on this particular question, but again, in an effort to sort of build on them rather than simply echo. Clearly digital skills are important, but the first has got to be affordable access, both in terms of connectivity and access to devices. And I think Vin also said this morning in a slightly different context, he mentioned critical thinking. And I think critical thinking, particularly as we see recently a lot of the news on fake news articles and things, I think critical thinking, I think the self-confidence to think for oneself, the curiosity to go out and seek, I think those are all things we need to refocus on again and really work to engender, particularly in our youth and frankly in those not so old as well, I would suggest. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Lynn. Thank you so much. Su Excelencia Daniel Sepúlveda, embajador, adelante.
Gracias, Victor. I want to echo actually Lynn's point. The United States government started the Global Connect project because we believe the first imperative is connectivity. Once you have connectivity, then yes, you need to build the skill base of people to use that connectivity productively. And I also want to echo the idea that it's a combination of both soft skills and hard skills. So the soft skills include information processing, self-direction, problem solving, critical thinking, and basic communication skills. And then the hard skills are skills like coding and understanding data and using data productively. And though these skills can be earned informally or through experience, we strongly recommend that governments set policies and partner with all the other stakeholders to promote digital literacy education and invest in the training for their citizenry. It's only through that joint collaboration process that we're going to have success at the very local level and then at the national and international level as well. Thank you.
Gracias, embajador. Thank you. Señor Oscar Robles, director ejecutivo del Registro de Direcciones de Internet para América Latina y Caribe.
Gracias. Pues me parece que una de las principales habilidades o competencias debe ser la capacidad para participar de una manera responsable en la toma de decisiones que requieren estos desafíos. Hablamos del modelo multi-stakeholder y uno de los elementos de este modelo multi-stakeholder son los usuarios, pero esa participación se tiene que dar de una manera informada y además de una manera responsable. Como decía Lynn, la capacidad de analizar de manera crítica la información que llega de manera masiva y poder tener una opinión formada de manera adecuada. Me parece que es una de las principales capacidades que tenemos nosotros que ayudar a formar en este proceso.
Gracias, Oscar. Adelante la señora Megan Richards, asesora principal de la Dirección General de Redes de Comunicación, Contenido y Tecnología de la Comisión Europea.
Thank you, Victor. I'll try to address 3 points very briefly. First, it relates to digital skills, which has already been mentioned. But I think one of the most important aspects in engendering digital skills and making sure that they are picked up and taken over and used is using the multi-stakeholder model. You have to bring all the interested actors together, educators, industry, and not just in the ICT sector. It has to be all sectors. So I think here is a really good example of how we can use a multi-stakeholder model to really push forward the adoption and use of digital skills. In Europe, we have something called the Grand Coalition on Digital Skills, where we're trying to start this already at European level. The other is web accessibility. And here I think public authorities have a real obligation and incentive to try to bring forward public legislation that will help to ensure better accessibility for people who are disabled. And the last one I think is really very important, and that's an enabling regulatory environment. And here, because I'm working backwards like you, Victor, I want to also thank very much the incentive and example of the government of Mexico, which has introduced a number of very important regulatory reforms domestically to try to encourage and drive forward the use and access of digital skills and making sure that the use of the internet is much better. And I want to thank you personally as well, Victor, for your initiative in this. Thanks again.
Muchas gracias por sus palabras tan gentiles. Señora Moira Paz Estensoro, representante en México del Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina, CAF.
Muchísimas gracias, Víctor, y agradeciendo a la iniciativa, a ustedes, el equipo y toda esta posibilidad de debatir estos temas. Quería simplemente reiterar que también para CAF la importancia de la educación y la educación para la transformación de un país es importantísimo. Obviamente la incorporación de la tecnología en la educación representa una de las mejores oportunidades para incrementar y transformar la calidad de la educación en la región. Y no solamente la educación, sino la educación para crear capital humano en los países y que puedan tener habilidades para enfrentar la transformación de los procesos productivos que hoy día no conocemos cuáles serán y cómo serán dentro de 5 años. Entonces, para que un plan de tecnología en la educación sea exitoso, creemos que se necesita un plan macro que incluya los 5 componentes fundamentales, un presupuesto recurrente, el plan de tecnología sólido, plataformas de contenido, entrenamiento, monitoreo y evaluación. Nuestros colegas en CAF, Mauricio Agudelo está aquí presente, está preparando un proyecto específico para Colombia. En este momento donde estamos llevando la paz y obviamente los cambios que se avecinan, tener todas las aulas conectadas en Colombia puede crear una nueva mentalidad, una nueva forma de pensar y obviamente esto consolidaría el proceso de paz en Colombia. Este es un ejemplo concreto con el que podemos utilizar el Internet y la conectividad. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. Adelante, señor Gonzalo Navarro, director ejecutivo de la Asociación Latinoamericana de Internet.
Gracias, Víctor. La verdad que, bueno, yo no soy un experto en educación ni tampoco pretendo serlo, pero sí he estudiado el tema de Internet hace bastante tiempo y obviamente trabajamos en la región en estos temas y sí tenemos algunas aproximaciones sobre esto. Una cosa que es difícil de predecir es cuáles son las habilidades que se deberían desarrollar, porque como muchos han dicho acá, la innovación es difícil de predecir y si somos bien honestos, ¿quién iba a pensar años atrás las habilidades o el set de habilidades que actualmente requerimos para conectarnos a Internet y para aprovechar o maximizar nuestra experiencia en Internet? Sin ir más lejos, y perdónenme que ocupe un ejemplo personal, pero cuando yo fui al colegio, que espero pensar que no fue hace mucho tiempo atrás, el tema o la cantidad de skills, habilidades o incluso el tipo de enseñanza a la que yo accedí y que la cual soy muy afortunado en la región, era totalmente diferente a las que yo veo, por ejemplo, que son necesarias incluso las que están empezando a ser implementadas en programas escolares como los que se le enseñan a mi hija de 5 años, incluso en el jardín infantil de mi hijo menor que tiene 2 y medio. Es un cambio total de mentalidad. Lo que sí me gustaría enfatizar es que sin importar cuáles son esas habilidades que eventualmente van a tener que ir desarrollándose y desarrollándose de la manera que decía Paul o de la manera que decía el embajador Sepúlveda, particularmente respecto de ciertos puntos y sin ignorar el tema fundamental que levantaba Lynn respecto del tema de la conectividad, que es muy importante para incluir a todos en este beneficio de la economía digital a través de Internet. Lo que sí es fundamental en nuestra opinión es que los principios que inspiran Internet y que permiten que estas personas aprovechen y maximicen los beneficios que trae esta herramienta como desarrollo permanezcan inalterables. Vale decir que una vez que se integran a Internet o que lo utilicen, puedan ser testigos de un Internet libre, abierto y que les permita desarrollar su potencial en vez de limitárselo. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Gonzalo. Señor Vint Cerf, vicepresidente senior evangelista de Internet en jefe en Google.
Thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that you concentrate on the last billion users, not the next billion. In fact, why don't we concentrate on the last 100, the last 100 people to finally get connected to the Internet? What's it going to take to get them online in a sustainable and useful way? One thing that at Google we have encountered is providing free access to the Internet. There are business models that support that. In India, we're putting up free Wi-Fi at the railroad stations, and we're getting a substantial positive response from that. Finding ways for both on the government side and in the private sector to underwrite the cost of access to the Internet in some way will increase its accessibility and its affordability. The only other thing I want to say on the table here has to do with the ability to maintain and operate Internet locally. It's very important that the people who are using the Internet also have the capacity to keep it running. It's not adequate to parachute in somewhere, install a system, and leave. What's needed for sustainable operation is skill and capacity to operate the system locally, and so I would encourage us to think along those lines. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Cerf. Ingeniera Aida Holz, integrante honoraria de la Junta Directiva de la Agencia de Gobierno Electrónico y Sociedad de la Información y del Conocimiento.
Bueno, hemos escuchado muchas cosas. Yo voy a hablar en particular de lo que se ha hecho en nuestro país en el sentido de la inclusión. y que abarca varios temas. El primero es la educación. En la educación se ha repartido computadoras a todos los niños de la educación pública, niños y adolescentes, es decir, en la educación primaria, preprimaria, primaria y secundaria. Esto genera una posibilidad de inclusión y a futuro de trabajo de todos los que están participando en este proyecto. Otro tema un poco extraño y que en parte ha sido muy criticado es que hoy en día se está repartiendo computadoras a todos los jubilados que tienen bajos ingresos, es decir, ingresos por menos de $850 más o menos a nivel de dólar. La condición es que lo soliciten, tener una computadora y además que reciban una capacitación previa a su uso. Esto, aunque a veces parece extraño, ha hecho que muchas más mujeres que hombres estén hoy utilizando en esa edad las computadoras para conectarse con sus familiares, con las redes sociales, que hacen una inclusión que a mediano plazo sirve y mucho. Y como consecuencia de estos dos elementos, la compañía de teléfono del Uruguay es pública, es estatal, y entonces ha tenido la influencia gubernamental, la solicitud gubernamental de una extensión de la conectividad a todos los hogares, con fibra óptica, con un costo muy bajo, y se espera que al 2020 el 90% de los hogares tengan acceso de fibra óptica para ellos. Estos son algunos elementos que generan inclusión en el país, y otro elemento es los trámites en línea que estarán para todos en el año que viene. Gracias a IGF, gracias a México por estar acá.
Muchas gracias a usted. Su Excelencia Hasanul Haq Innu, Ministro de Información del Ministerio de Información de Bangladesh.
Thank you. Well, I agree that internet may be accessible, but how to use net is a problem. So I go with the major speakers that the latest applications and the latest internet availability at the remotest corner is sometimes possible, but the skill to handle the internet is a difficult question. Here I go with content development, ICT literacy, capacity building to develop skills and digitize the government departments which is giving services to the people. And last, I think that where the affordability is a problem, where in Bangladesh we have opened up 5,000 plus e-centers that is run by private sector but given by the government, private people. There they get all the services. So a woman can come and get the services from there. So we can open up more e-centers, agriculture centers from where the service can be given to the remotest corner and remotest persons who doesn't know how to handle a mobile internet. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, ministro. Thank you. Doctora María Elena Estavillo, comisionada del Instituto Federal de Telecomunicaciones de México. Adelante.
Muchas gracias. Respecto de esta pregunta, me pareció relevante considerar que cuando hablamos de habilidades estamos preguntándonos cómo acercar a las personas al Internet, lo cual es una pregunta muy relevante y yo la relacionaría tanto con servicios, con terminales, cobertura, asequibilidad, pero también me parece que tenemos que asegurarnos de acercar el Internet a las personas. Y ahí es a donde yo reenfocaría esta pregunta hacia la importancia que tiene que generemos contenidos y habilidades considerando las diferencias entre los diferentes grupos de personas. Si esperamos que todos los grupos tengan las mismas habilidades, entonces estaríamos corriendo el riesgo de reproducir en el ámbito de Internet las brechas que observamos en la sociedad. Brechas entre grupos educados, no educados, entre hombres, mujeres, ámbito rural, ámbito urbano, etcétera. Por eso me parece que tenemos que generar este punto de encuentro que considere las dos direcciones. Y para ello me parece importantísimo generar estrategias para desarrollar un continuo de habilidades y de contenidos que se relacionen directamente con los diferentes grupos de personas.
Muchas gracias, doctora. Adelante el ingeniero Hassam El Gamal, presidente del Centro de Información y Apoyo para la Toma de Decisiones del Gabinete de Egipto.
Thank you. Well, many have been said by the distinguished speakers, especially related to embracing the spirit of multi-stakeholderism, researching further technical affordable access solutions, as well as working on required information exchange promoting policies. I will just add that for swifter results in the developing world, we need more South-to-South dialogue and exchange of knowledge, experience, and best practices on how to optimize Internet inclusiveness and best serve the community with focus on bridging the digital gap. We need to believe in the creativity of the children and the entrepreneurship spirit of the youth. And we just need to provide affordable knowledge bank through the Internet and as much as possible in local language to the community. We need to do this with basic free access to that knowledge bank in main community areas as a start. So to have the most important basic engagement to acquire knowledge, embrace creativity, and bridging the divide. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Adelante, Su Excelencia Dr. Siyabonga Kuele, Ministro de Telecomunicaciones y Servicios Postales del Gobierno de Sudáfrica.
Thank you, Victor. I think the first important thing that citizens are looking for information which empowers themselves. To us, the basic education is very critical, including the internet literacy, focusing on women and also focusing in developing local hubs for ICT. As a government, we're spending a lot of money in free basic education for the poor. The second one, I agree with those who say most of the poor, or the last 100, will be looking for information from government. So it's very important that as government, we digitize our information and make it available for citizens. And that will help increase the uptake. Thirdly is the issue of enabling the e-commerce, and particularly for small businesses, so that people can derive value from this internet. And fourthly is the issue of translation, because we're in interconnected world, so that we can translate whatever we import from other countries to our own circumstances, and making sure that we also commercialize the local content. That's where people can really see the value of the internet. Then we can move to higher skills like manufacturing, R&D, and so on, and innovation. But lastly, is the issue of national and regional internet exchange points. I think we have to share. As a country, we're helping our fellow African countries to put more internet exchange points, because that's what will cause also increase the access because of the affordability. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Adelante, doctor Steve Crocker, presidente de la Junta Ejecutiva de la Corporación de Internet para la Asignación de Nombres y Números.
In the interest of time, I'm going to yield.
Muchas gracias. Adelante, el profesor Mishi Chudari, por favor.
As the World Bank says that we will not be able to reap any digital dividends without making analog infrastructure. So that's very important to have the analog infrastructure in place, which includes electricity, etc. can't stress enough on the importance of the local language content, without which most of the population will stay away from the net. Use of encryption and teaching the population to use encryption to protect their privacy is an important skill we cannot afford, especially because the choices we make in technology we use will affect the politics we still have. Also, training our population on cybersecurity issues, which is an important part of how we actually deal with it. So starting apprenticeship programs, etc., is also very useful. Training people on using software that everybody can see, copy, modify, and share, which is free and open source software, is far more important than concentrating on education, technical education, which only teaches vendor names. Consuming videos online, although kittens are very cute, but that's not how we become technically advanced. So teaching your population about actual skills, and free and open source communities offer a very cheap way of making such progress. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, profesora. Doctora Kathy Brown, presidenta y directora ejecutiva de Internet Society. Adelante, por favor.
Thank you so much. I find myself aligning with the Minister of South Africa, and I'd like to build on what he has just said. I think when we provide the tools of the internet, connectivity, access to devices, relevant apps, as you said earlier, that help people solve their own problems, and affordability of the technology, we do indeed empower people to move ahead themselves. We have to have an enabling environment, as we call it, and I would direct your attention to the community networking programs that we are partnering with a number of development folks who have, at the height of their goals, self-empowerment of the community. So the community has the tools, the community learns how to use the tools, and then they teach each other as they develop those tools. And I'll give you just what I found to be startling. So yes, indeed, people do not read in many villages. Interestingly, the apps of today have other ways in which we can use their functionality, including symbols, including voice, including other kinds of methodologies that don't require me to read. And I've seen women in villages use these apps to enhance their own economic welfare in ways that is simply amazing. And while they are doing that, and the men of the village are figuring out how to use those same apps to do what they need to do in their kind of commerce, the children are indeed at school, getting the skills they need by learning reading, by learning computing, by learning how to use these devices. And you see this energy just fill the village. I do believe that this is how we're going to get the last billion, because the last billion of our people are living in the least developed areas of the least developed countries, and they are predominantly in our rural areas, some in our urban areas, which themselves can create these kind of villages. So I think this idea of community networking is central to this idea of skill building. So thank you.
Muchas gracias, doctora Kathy Brown. Adelante el maestro Scoatl Tonatiu Bravo, rector general de la Universidad de Guadalajara.
Gracias, Víctor. Bueno, yo diría que si el modelo de múltiples partes interesadas de la anterior intervención es fundamental y coherente con la naturaleza del Internet, en mi opinión, también ese enfoque de múltiples partes interesadas debe ser el camino para que podamos ampliar los esfuerzos que generen habilidades y capacidades para empoderar a la gente en el uso de Internet. Todas las partes debemos de complementar nuestros esfuerzos en ese sentido. Agregaría, tenemos que caminar hacia la formación de ciudadanos del siglo XXI. Esto implica que los estados, los gobiernos, doten del derecho constitucional en sus leyes en el máximo nivel para que el acceso a Internet esté garantizado como derecho. Pero después de eso se necesitan los recursos para habilitar y hacer realidad ese derecho. Y se necesita incluirlo, como aquí se ha dicho, en el paquete de educación básica. El uso intensivo de Internet es una necesidad ya para el nivel de educación media superior. Y yo diría que las habilidades que debemos desarrollar tienen que estar relacionadas con la conectividad, con el emprendimiento, como aquí se comentó, trabajo en equipo, solución de problemas, mediación, análisis y organización de la información, creación de documentos en distintos formatos, conocimiento y uso de herramientas dinámicas de Internet, crear seguridad informática y desarrollarla, pero también la formación para el uso ético de Internet, las competencias globales como el dominio de idiomas, el respeto a la multiculturalidad, el uso de las tecnologías, discernir acerca del tipo de información que está disponible en las poco más de 1,000 millones de páginas que hay disponibles en la web. Saber discriminar el uso de la información y apoyar que el mayor número de transacciones en la sociedad por día utilicen precisamente el Internet. Concluyo señalando que todas estas habilidades tienen que estar compenetradas por políticas incluyentes y sustentables desde el punto de vista económico. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, rector. Tenemos la palabra el doctor Eber Betanzos Torres, subsecretario de la Función Pública.
Gracias. La inclusión y el desarrollo de habilidades digitales se relaciona con la necesidad de que todos los sectores sociales puedan aprovechar, utilizar las tecnologías de la información y el conocimiento y contar con un acceso adecuado a este tipo de servicios. Esto requiere necesariamente una democratización del acceso a las tecnologías de la información, lo cual implica educación, para gestionar la información, gestionar el conocimiento, para generar un pensamiento crítico, un trabajo colaborativo, en suma, educación. Pero es una educación para desarrollar habilidades que permitan establecer una cultura de la innovación, del uso eficiente, racional y razonable de la tecnología. Gracias.
Gracias, subsecretario. Adelante, maestro Philip Ben, vicepresidente senior de Comercio Electrónico de Walmart.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you for reversing the flow. I now finally know what it means to be a Wilson or a Wong. We at Walmart serve 260 million customers a week, and I think a lot has been said in this forum about who that customer is or who is on the demand side of the internet. Let me talk a little bit about what we see on the development side. We don't see as diverse a community developing or creating the internet as we see the community that consumes it. And in particular, we would like to see a much, much higher percentage of women in technology. We think that starts with a concerted effort to work on science, technology, engineering, and math degrees. We are strongly supportive of STEM efforts to develop female talent that can then produce the content, the internet solutions that are then required by a society that is as diverse as the one that should be creating it. But it doesn't stop there. We also need to be responsible as a private business in the private sector to create the conditions for female technology talent to thrive, create the working conditions for them to create as diverse a content and as diverse an internet as the community that creates it. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Doctora Dorothy Atwood, vicepresidenta senior de Políticas Públicas Globales de Walt Disney Company.
Thank you. I would just add here that we should always focus also on even modest partnerships that can really lead to remarkable results. And I just would focus on two that we've been involved in that give good examples of how a modest investment can lead to pretty remarkable outcomes. We partnered with an NGO called Chico's Net here in Latin America to create a digital literacy program that gives teachers, parents, and children digital literacy and citizenship skills to be safer and fully engaged online. The program we made available in Spanish and Portuguese for the market, and it includes school-based curriculum materials, a website for kids with games and activity and programming to introduce kids to coding. It became so popular that over 7,300 teachers have been trained and 500,000 children have gone through the program to enable that kind of skill development, a very small idea that led to big results. At the professional level, another program that we work to grow with the partnering with the African animation studio Triggerfish and the South African government was to fund script development for new artists in Africa. We were blown away. We created the story contest, but in the process of that, received 1,300 entries from 30 African countries. The winners ended up receiving a pretty modest prize, which was a 2-week immersion session at Disney Animation, but it made a big difference in their lives, and it was a very well-received, small but important program. So I would encourage people at this venue to think about ways in which we can improve skills even in modest, small programs.
Muchas gracias, doctora. Adelante, el señor Yari Arco, presidente de la Fuerza de Tareas de Ingeniería de Internet, de la IGF Task Force.
Thank you. And I won't say much more than others have said about the skills. I think the soft skills that Lynn and Daniel and others brought up is hugely important. But I do want to follow up a little bit on some of the discussions. So Malcolm and others brought up the access to broadband services, access to internet as a critical thing. And of course, it's very, very important. And there's a lot of work that remains. And I really, really like Vince's formulation of the last 100 people. I'm optimistic that we'll get there. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not enough. We also need openness. We need good global connectivity. We need local services. We need ability to create businesses locally and globally wherever you are. And I saw a lot of support for that kind of thinking in the discussion. Dorothy mentioned local content. Michi mentioned open participation, freedom from excessive surveillance. And I would agree that avoiding excessive surveillance or censorship is a key thing here as well. And the minister from South Africa promoted local and localized content. That's very, very important. So I think it is about quality as well as quantity. Thank you.
Thank you. Adelante, Dr. Lenny Montiel.
Thank you. I would like to say that we need to be aware, and I know a lot of people don't have these figures. The ITU has just released a report about the amount of people that are not using the internet in the world. So today, at the end of 2016, we have around the world 53% of the population is not using the internet. That means around 3.9 billion. I insist, this is more than half of the population of the world. So a lot have been said. I am representing here the United Nations, and I have an obligation to raise the voice for those who are vulnerable and poor in the world. And I would like to say, if we are speaking about enhancing connection, increasing connectivity, we have to immediately think that we are reducing exclusion, and by doing that, we are addressing poverty, and by doing that, we are contributing to reducing inequalities in the world. Therefore, let's not forget that we are speaking about Africa is having 75% of the population not connected to the internet. The Americas is having 35% out of the internet. Asia, 58%. Arab states, almost 60%. So we need to be careful about what we speak when we try to promote connectivity, and we have to be conscious that by trying to enhance connectivity to the internet, we are trying to push and enhance conditions for sustainable development of our societies. So let's not be shy of saying by enhancing connectivity, we are addressing the quality of life of poor women and men. And I insist we need to repeat, women, 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 women. Women have to be included in the internet. Today we have 275 million more men than women in the internet. We don't have to forget that we have minorities, indigenous peoples, that under any circumstances today will have no capacity to get into the internet unless there is an explicit effort by those who have the capacity to support them, meaning we all. Let's not forget that today we have millions of men and women fleeing from violence or from natural disaster around the world, and they are also have the right to be connected and integrated into the internet. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias. Y un agradecimiento a todos los de la mesa por realmente poner el énfasis en el resumen y hacer los puntos más cortos. Una disculpa por haber interrumpido las presentaciones de su excelentísima Su Excelencia Hassanul Haqqinu, Ministro de Información del Ministerio de Información de Bangladesh, y también al señor Shigeki Suzuki, Viceministro de la Coordinación de Políticas del Ministerio de Interior de Japón. Se hace con el interés de mantener el tiempo. Espero no lo tome mal. Se tomaron muchos temas y muchos temas recurrentes. Se habla de incrementar un esfuerzo en temas de conectividad, de accesibilidad, de llevar anchos de banda mayores a nuestra población marginada, a nuestras poblaciones todavía con inequidad. Se habla también de incrementar nuestras capacidades, nuestras habilidades, de enfocarnos en nuestras nuevas generaciones. Ahí el gobierno mexicano también ha hecho mucho énfasis a través de reformas estructurales como la de educación, en la que estamos ya lanzando nuevos modelos educativos también enfocados al tema de apertura, utilizando bases de datos abiertas, llevando la herramienta que nos da, la plataforma que nos da Internet, nuevos contenidos accesibles, democráticos, para poder acelerar, obviamente, nuestra incursión en una sociedad del conocimiento. Se hablaba también, Óscar Robles mencionaba una responsabilidad. Tenemos cada uno de nosotros dentro de nuestra área de injerencia, llámese nuestra área nuestra parte interesada en el, yo digo que ahora en el gobierno tengo esta labor, pero también tengo la responsabilidad y tengo la necesidad de pedir que se respeten mis derechos como ciudadano. Existen muchas brechas en el mundo, existen muchas brechas en México. Se ha acelerado mucho la penetración y se ha cortado bastante la brecha digital en los últimos años. Seguimos avanzando, pero realmente es muy importante para nosotros también, a través de un modelo de múltiples partes interesadas, madurar la conversación, hacerla más cercana con los diferentes grupos, con el grupo académico, técnico, con sociedad civil especialmente, para llevar esta conversación a un puntos en común y poder acelerar una digitalización del país. Y pensar obviamente, como dice el señor Cerf, no en los últimos 1000 y en los últimos 100, sino día a día en las nuevas generaciones, en los cuales van a vivir ya en un ecosistema de Internet. Con esto agradezco realmente la presentación de cada uno de ustedes y el tiempo que nuestra audiencia nos dio para escucharnos.